growth makes enemies. Growth makes enemies in ways most people never expect. Many believe that becoming better will make everyone proud, but sometimes your improvement quietly threatens people who were comfortable with the weaker version of you. The moment you begin changing, building confidence, setting boundaries, or refusing to shrink, certain people start acting different, not because you hurt them, but because your growth reminds them of the courage they never found in themselves. People often become attached to the version of you they could control, the quiet version, the insecure version, the version that always said yes, accepted less, and made their ego feel safe. When that version disappears, your progress can feel like rejection to them. This is where it gets creepy. Envy rarely looks like envy. It hides behind jokes, fake concern, cold silence, delayed support, or small comments designed to make you doubt yourself. Some people will clap in public but secretly hope you slow down. Your discipline exposes their excuses. Your confidence exposes their fear. Your boundaries expose how much they benefited when you had none. Without saying a word, your growth becomes evidence that change was possible all along. That is why growth can feel lonely. Certain friendships weaken. Certain relationships become tense. Some people preferred you struggling because it kept them comfortable, useful, or superior. The dark truth is that not everyone wants to see you rise. Some only loved you when your life made them feel ahead. And when you finally become stronger, your growth becomes a mirror they cannot stand looking into. So instead of facing themselves, they begin resenting you for becoming what they were too afraid to become. Silence reveals people. Silence reveals people in a way words never can. When you stop explaining, stop chasing, stop reacting, and become quiet, people begin showing you what they were hiding behind noise. Many people depend on your constant responses to control the rhythm of the relationship. As long as you keep defending yourself, apologizing, overthinking, or trying to fix the tension, they can keep you trapped inside their version of the story. But silence removes that power. It creates space. And in that space, their real character starts speaking louder than their mouth did. This is why silence can feel uncomfortable. It forces people to sit with themselves. The honest person will reflect. The guilty person will panic. The manipulator will push harder. The selfish person will become irritated because your silence denies them access to your energy. What makes this creepy is that silence exposes intention. Some people only reach out when they need something. Some only become kind when they feel you pulling away. Some suddenly act wounded because you stopped feeding the drama they created. Others disappear completely, proving they were only present when you were useful. Silence also reveals who respects you. A mature person will give you room without punishing you for needing peace. An unsafe person will treat your quietness like an attack because they are used to controlling your emotions through pressure, guilt, or confusion. The darker truth is that you do not always need more conversations to understand someone. Sometimes you need less. Because when you stop performing, explaining, and begging to be understood, people reveal whether they wanted connection, control, access, or attention. Boundaries expose users. Boundaries expose users faster than arguments ever will. The moment you begin saying no, protecting your time, limiting access, or refusing to tolerate certain behavior, people start revealing how they truly viewed you all along. Many relationships appear peaceful only because one person constantly sacrifices themselves to keep everyone comfortable. As long as you stay available, overgiving, forgiving, and emotionally accessible at all times, people rarely complain. But the second you create limits, everything changes. Suddenly you are called selfish, distant, cold, dramatic, or difficult. This is where the disturbing truth appears. Healthy people respect boundaries even when they do not fully understand them. Users, however, see boundaries as obstacles because your limits interrupt the benefits they were receiving from you. Some people were never attached to you emotionally. They were attached to your usefulness, your constant attention, your emotional labor, your patience, your willingness to tolerate disrespect without consequences. The boundary exposes this instantly because it forces people to reveal whether they valued you as a person or valued what they could take from you. What makes this especially creepy is how quickly behavior can change. Someone who once acted loving may suddenly become angry the moment they lose unrestricted access to your energy. They may guilt trip you, mock your standards, question your loyalty, or act like your self-respect is cruelty. Boundaries also expose hidden entitlement. Some people genuinely believe they deserve unlimited access to you simply because they are used to receiving it. When that access disappears, resentment surfaces. The darker truth is that boundaries do not destroy healthy relationships. They destroy unhealthy arrangements disguised as relationships. And sometimes the people most offended by your boundaries were benefiting the most from your lack of them. Apologies can be control. Apologies can be control when they are used to manage your emotions instead of repair the damage that was done. Many people assume that saying, "I'm sorry," automatically means someone has changed, but some apologies are carefully designed to keep access to you without requiring real accountability. This is what makes certain apologies disturbing. They sound sincere enough to calm your anger, soften your boundaries, and restart the relationship, yet nothing actually changes afterward. The behavior repeats, the disrespect returns, the same wounds reopen again and again. Some people apologize because they regret hurting you. Others apologize because they fear consequences. There is a huge difference between remorse and damage control. Real remorse creates changed behavior. Manipulative apologies create temporary emotional relief just long enough to stop you from leaving. What makes this especially creepy is how emotional guilt becomes part of the control. The moment you stay upset, they act wounded. They say things like, "I already apologized," or "What more do you want from me?" Suddenly the focus shifts away from the pain they caused and onto your reaction to it. You begin feeling guilty for still being hurt. Manipulative people understand that apologies can reset access. A few emotional words, tears, promises, or moments of vulnerability can pull someone back into the cycle. This is why many toxic relationships survive for years. The apology creates hope, and hope keeps people emotionally attached even when the pattern never changes. The darker truth is that words are cheap when behavior stays the same. Some people do not apologize because they value your feelings. They apologize because losing control over you feels more uncomfortable than admitting fault. And once forgiveness becomes automatic, the apology itself becomes part of the manipulation. Some people miss access. Some people do not actually miss you. They miss access to you. This is one of the darkest truths hidden inside many relationships, because affection can sometimes be confused with attachment, convenience, or emotional dependency. When someone loses access to your attention, your kindness, your emotional support, or your constant presence, they may suddenly return acting loving, nostalgic, or deeply emotional. At first, it feels flattering. It makes you believe you were valued more than you realized. But over time, their behavior exposes something unsettling. They do not truly miss who you are as a person. They miss what you provided for them. Some people miss having someone who listened to them without judgment. Some miss the validation you gave freely. Others miss the comfort of knowing you would always answer, forgive, support, or stay available no matter how poorly they treated you. What they mourn is not always the connection itself, but the benefits they lost when your presence disappeared. This becomes especially disturbing when you notice how quickly their interest fades once access returns. the effort disappears, the attention weakens, the emotional intensity fades again. Suddenly the same neglect, inconsistency, or disrespect quietly returns, because the panic was never about losing you emotionally. It was about losing control, convenience, or emotional security. People who genuinely value you care about your well-being even when they no longer benefit from you. But people attached only to access become restless the moment your energy is no longer available to them. The darker truth is that some relationships survive only because one person keeps giving endless emotional access. And when that access finally closes, certain people mistake withdrawal symptoms for love, loneliness, or regret, when in reality, they simply miss the comfort you once provided. Kindness needs limits. Kindness needs limits because without boundaries, kindness slowly turns into self-destruction. Many people are taught that being endlessly patient, forgiving, available, and understanding makes them a good person. But the darker reality is that some people see unlimited kindness as an opportunity, not a virtue. At first, it feels harmless. You give people second chances. You stay understanding during disrespect. You keep helping even when you are exhausted. You ignore small warning signs because you want to believe people mean well. Over time, however, certain individuals begin adjusting to your kindness instead of appreciating it. This is where things become disturbing. The more you tolerate, the more some people take. Your kindness slowly teaches them what they can get away with. What once would have shocked them becomes normal because there were never consequences attached to their behavior. Some people do not intentionally plan to use others, but human nature adapts quickly to comfort. If someone realizes you will always forgive them, always answer, always sacrifice, or always stay no matter what happens, they may unconsciously stop valuing your emotional limits altogether. What makes this especially painful is that kind people often blame themselves first. They think they are not patient enough, not loving enough, or not understanding enough. Meanwhile, the real problem is that their kindness has no protection around it. Healthy kindness includes self-respect. It knows when to help and when to step back. It understands that protecting your peace is not cruelty. Without limits, kindness attracts people who consume without giving back. The darker truth is that some people will only respect your kindness after they experience your absence, because when kindness never says no, unhealthy people stop seeing it as generosity and start seeing it as permission. Confusion can be control. Confusion can be control when someone constantly keeps you uncertain, emotionally unstable, or mentally exhausted, so you become easier to influence. Many people think manipulation always looks aggressive or obvious, but some of the most controlling individuals operate through confusion instead of force. At first, it feels subtle, mixed signals, contradicting statements, hot and cold behavior. One day they make you feel important, and the next day they become distant or emotionally unavailable. Every conversation leaves you questioning yourself instead of questioning them. This is what makes confusion so psychologically dangerous. The human mind naturally seeks clarity and emotional stability. When someone repeatedly disrupts that stability, your energy becomes focused on understanding their behavior rather than protecting yourself from it. You start overanalyzing texts, replaying conversations, and searching for meaning in tiny details. What makes this especially creepy is that confusion weakens confidence over time. The more emotionally disoriented you become, the more dependent you may grow on the same person causing the confusion. They slowly become both the source of your anxiety and the source of your relief. Some manipulators intentionally avoid giving direct answers because uncertainty keeps people emotionally attached. Clear behavior allows clear decisions. Confusion delays decisions. It keeps you waiting, hoping, explaining, and trying harder. This is why toxic relationships often feel mentally exhausting. You are constantly trying to solve a puzzle that was designed to stay unsolved. Every moment of affection makes you forget the emotional chaos that came before it. The darker truth is that people who genuinely care about you usually bring clarity, not constant confusion. They communicate honestly. They do not enjoy watching you overthink your value to them. But manipulators understand something terrifying. A confused person is far easier to control than a confident one. Loyalty can trap you. Loyalty can trap you when it keeps you attached to people, places, or relationships that are slowly destroying your peace. Many people are taught that loyalty is always noble, but blind loyalty can quietly become a prison disguised as virtue. This is what makes loyalty dangerous. The more emotionally invested you become, the harder it feels to walk away, even when the situation is clearly unhealthy. You start confusing endurance with love. You convince yourself that staying proves strength, while leaving feels like betrayal. Some people know this and use it to their advantage. They rely on your loyalty more than your happiness. They know you will forgive quickly, stay longer, and tolerate behavior that others would never accept. Over time, your loyalty becomes predictable, and predictability gives manipulative people power. What makes this especially disturbing is how guilt becomes part of the trap. You remember the good memories, the years invested, the promises made, or the version of them that once cared. Even when the relationship changes, your loyalty keeps trying to resurrect what no longer exists. You stay attached to potential, while reality keeps hurting you. Loyal people often suffer silently because they fear becoming the person who gives up. They keep making excuses for disrespect, dishonesty, emotional neglect, or repeated disappointment because they believe loyalty means never leaving. The darker truth is that unhealthy people often admire loyalty they never intend to return. They become comfortable receiving sacrifices they would never make themselves. And the longer you remain trapped inside one-sided loyalty, the more you slowly abandon yourself, trying to protect something that stopped protecting you a long time ago. Forgiveness is not trust. Forgiveness is not trust, even though many people confuse the two. Forgiveness is the decision to stop carrying constant hatred, anger, or emotional poison inside yourself. Trust, however, is something completely different. Trust is earned through consistency, safety, honesty, and repeated proof over time. This is why some of the deepest emotional pain happens after betrayal. A person may forgive someone in order to heal, move forward, or free themselves from bitterness, yet still feel unsafe around them afterward. The wound may close emotionally, but the memory of what happened changes the nervous system. Once someone proves they can lie, manipulate, betray, or abandon you, your mind begins watching for danger differently. What makes this disturbing is how often people demand trust simply because they apologized. They expect forgiveness to instantly erase consequences. The moment you become cautious, guarded, or slower to believe them, they act offended. Suddenly, your pain becomes the problem instead of the damage that created it. Some people use forgiveness as a shortcut back into your life. They want immediate emotional access without rebuilding the safety they destroyed. But trust does not return because someone says sorry. It returns when their actions remain consistent long after the apology is forgotten. This becomes especially creepy when patterns repeat. A person hurts you, apologizes, regains your trust, then repeats the same behavior again. Over time, forgiveness becomes automatic while trust quietly dies inside you. The darker truth is that forgiveness can exist without reconciliation. You can forgive someone and still refuse to give them the same access again, because sometimes the lesson is not learning how to hate less. Sometimes the lesson is learning who can no longer safely hold your trust. Support is not always real. Support is not always real because some people cheer for you only as long as your success remains small, safe, or convenient for them. At first, they sound encouraging. They praise your ideas, celebrate your progress, and act like they want the best for you. But the moment your growth becomes serious, their energy quietly changes. This is what makes fake support so unsettling. It rarely disappears all at once. Instead, it becomes colder, quieter, and harder to explain. The enthusiasm fades, the encouragement becomes delayed, compliments start sounding forced. Some people suddenly stop showing interest in the very dreams they once claimed to believe in. What makes this especially disturbing is that jealousy often hides beneath support. Human beings constantly compare themselves to those around them. When someone close begins improving, gaining attention, becoming successful, or escaping limitations, it can trigger insecurity in people who secretly feel left behind. Some individuals support your dream emotionally only when it does not threaten their identity. They liked you when you were trying. They become uncomfortable when you start succeeding. Your progress silently forces them to confront their own fears, excuses, or lack of action. This is why fake support can feel confusing. The words still sound positive, but the energy feels different. Some people begin minimizing your achievements, changing the subject, offering subtle criticism, or acting distant whenever good things happen for you. The darker truth is that not everyone clapping for you wants you to win completely. Some people enjoy being around potential because potential feels harmless. Real success, however, changes social dynamics. It changes confidence, power, attention, and comparison. And sometimes, the people who once encouraged your growth become uncomfortable the moment they realize you are actually becoming everything you said you would become. Some stay to benefit. Some people stay in your life not because they truly love you, but because they benefit from what you provide. This is one of the darkest truths about human relationships, because loyalty and attachment can sometimes be driven more by convenience than genuine care. At first, everything feels real. They are present during conversations, involved in your life, and emotionally close enough to make you trust them. But over time, a disturbing pattern begins to appear. Their energy changes the moment you stop being useful. The attention fades when you stop giving. The warmth weakens when you stop sacrificing yourself. Some people are attached to your kindness, your emotional support, your money, your attention, your loyalty, your patience, or the comfort you provide during difficult moments. They may not even realize it consciously. To them, staying close feels natural because they have become dependent on the benefits you bring into their life. What makes this especially painful is that users rarely appear selfish in the beginning. Many are skilled at making the relationship feel mutual. They know how to say the right things, show affection at the right moments, and give just enough effort to keep the connection alive. The truth usually appears when your circumstances change. The moment you become unavailable, emotionally drained, financially struggling, or less willing to overextend yourself, their behavior shifts. Suddenly your needs become inconvenient. Your pain becomes too much. Your boundaries become a problem. This is why difficult seasons reveal people so clearly. Real connection survives inconvenience. Opportunistic attachment often disappears once the benefits shrink. The darker truth is that some people never loved the person you were. They loved the access, comfort, stability, or emotional security you provided. And the moment those benefits weaken, their loyalty quietly begins disappearing too. Truth offends illusion. Truth offends illusion, because many people are emotionally attached to the stories they tell themselves. Human beings do not just protect their reputation in front of others. They protect the version of reality that allows them to avoid guilt, fear, shame, or responsibility. This is why the truth can make people angry even when it is calm, factual, or obvious. The truth threatens the emotional comfort that illusions provide. Some people build entire identities around denial. They convince themselves they are innocent, loyal, loving, or honest, while their actions quietly prove otherwise. The moment reality challenges that illusion, defensiveness appears immediately. What makes this disturbing is that people often attack the messenger instead of facing the truth itself. Rather than reflecting, they accuse you of being negative, disrespectful, dramatic, jealous, or cruel. This reaction is not always about hatred. Sometimes it is psychological self-protection. Accepting the truth would force them to confront parts of themselves they spent years avoiding. Illusions also exist inside relationships. Some people would rather live inside false peace than face uncomfortable honesty. They ignore betrayal, manipulation, emotional neglect, or obvious red flags because the illusion feels safer than reality. Truth becomes dangerous because once seen clearly, it demands change. This is why silence often follows uncomfortable honesty. Deep down, many people already know the truth. They simply resent the person who forces them to look directly at it. The darker truth is that people rarely hate truth when it benefits them. They hate truth when it threatens the identity, comfort, control, or fantasy they built their emotional survival around. And sometimes the strongest emotional reactions come from people who secretly know you are right. Peace can be fake. Peace can be fake when it is built on silence, fear, and emotional suppression instead of honesty and safety. Many relationships, families, friendships, and environments appear calm on the surface, but underneath that calmness lives resentment, tension, anxiety, and unspoken pain. This is what makes fake peace so dangerous. It often looks healthy from the outside. Nobody argues openly. Nobody raises their voice. Everything seems stable. But the reality is that one person is constantly swallowing their emotions to avoid conflict, punishment, rejection, or emotional chaos. In many situations, people confuse the absence of confrontation with genuine harmony. They tell themselves things are fine simply because no one is fighting anymore. But real peace does not require someone to abandon their feelings, walk on eggshells, or silence themselves to keep everyone comfortable. What makes this especially disturbing is how fake peace slowly changes a person psychologically. Over time, they become afraid of honesty because honesty threatens the fragile calmness holding everything together. They stop expressing disappointment. They stop setting boundaries. They stop speaking about what hurts them. Eventually, they begin disconnecting from themselves completely. Manipulative people often benefit from fake peace because silence protects their behavior. As long as nobody speaks openly, nothing changes. The tension stays hidden while the unhealthy pattern continues underneath the surface. This is why some environments feel emotionally exhausting, even when nothing bad seems to be happening. Your nervous system senses the truth before your mind fully understands it. The smiles feel forced. The conversations feel careful. The connection feels emotionally hollow. The darker truth is that real peace is not built on avoidance. Real peace can survive honesty, disagreement, boundaries, and truth. Fake peace survives only as long as someone keeps sacrificing themselves to maintain the illusion that everything is okay. Patience becomes permission. Patience becomes permission when people realize there are no consequences for repeatedly hurting, disappointing, or disrespecting you. Many people believe patience is always a virtue, but in unhealthy relationships, endless patience can slowly train others to take you for granted. At first, patience looks noble. You stay calm during disrespect. You give second chances. You try to understand people's struggles, moods, and mistakes. You tell yourself that everyone deserves grace. But over time, something disturbing can happen. Instead of appreciating your patience, certain people begin adjusting their behavior around it. This is where the dynamic turns dark. The more you tolerate without responding, the more some people unconsciously treat your tolerance as approval. They stop seeing your patience as kindness and start seeing it as weakness. What once would have embarrassed them no longer affects them because they believe you will always stay, forgive, or endure it. What makes this especially painful is that patient people often suffer quietly. They keep hoping the other person will finally understand, change, or appreciate everything they have endured. Meanwhile, the unhealthy behavior becomes normalized. Disrespect becomes routine. Broken promises become expected. Emotional neglect becomes part of everyday life. Some people only change when consequences become real. As long as access to you remains guaranteed, there is little motivation to reflect deeply on their actions. Human nature often protects comfort before accountability. The creepy truth is that people study what you continue tolerating. Every ignored lie, repeated excuse, and accepted disrespect silently teaches others how far they can go with you. Patience is healthy when it exists alongside self-respect. Without limits, however, patience slowly becomes permission for unhealthy people to continue crossing lines they should have feared crossing long ago. Love without respect drains. Love without respect slowly drains the life out of a person. Many people believe love alone is enough to sustain a relationship, but affection without respect eventually becomes emotionally exhausting. Someone can say they love you every day while still speaking to you carelessly, ignoring your feelings, crossing your boundaries, or making you feel small. This is what makes disrespect so dangerous in relationships. It rarely begins with obvious cruelty. It often starts subtly through dismissive comments, inconsistency, broken promises, or behavior that makes you feel emotionally unimportant. Over time, you begin tolerating things that quietly damage your confidence because the presence of love makes you question your own pain. What makes this especially disturbing is that people often stay because they confuse emotional attachment with emotional safety. They hold on to memories, affection, chemistry, or moments of kindness while ignoring how deeply disrespected they feel underneath it all. Respect is what protects love from becoming destructive. Without it, one person slowly carries the emotional weight of the entire relationship. They over-explain, over-forgive, over-sacrifice, and constantly shrink themselves just to keep peace alive. Some people claim to love you while repeatedly humiliating you, ignoring your boundaries, manipulating your emotions, or treating your needs like inconveniences. The relationship becomes draining because your nervous system never fully relaxes. You are constantly trying to earn care that should come naturally. The darkest part is that disrespect often grows where tolerance has no limits. The more someone realizes you will stay despite emotional mistreatment, the more normal the behavior becomes to them. Real love does not leave you constantly anxious, emotionally exhausted, or questioning your worth, because the moment respect disappears, love slowly stops feeling safe and starts feeling heavy. Red flags get costly. Red flags get costly when ignored long enough. Most dangerous situations do not begin with disaster. They begin with small warnings that seem easy to excuse in the moment. A lie that felt minor, a disrespectful comment disguised as a joke, a strange feeling in your stomach that you tried to rationalize away. This is what makes red flags so dangerous. They rarely appear dramatic at first. If toxic people revealed their full nature immediately, almost nobody would stay. Instead, harmful behavior arrives slowly, in manageable pieces, giving you just enough comfort between the damage to keep doubting your instincts. Many people ignore red flags because they become emotionally attached before the danger fully reveals itself. Feelings create blindness. Hope becomes stronger than logic. You focus on potential instead of patterns. You remember the good moments and convince yourself the bad moments are temporary. What makes this especially disturbing is how expensive ignored warnings eventually become. The longer you tolerate disrespect, manipulation, dishonesty, or emotional instability, the more damage enters your life quietly. Your confidence weakens, your standards lower, your nervous system adapts to stress until chaos starts feeling normal. Red flags also become more dangerous when repeatedly forgiven. Some people study what you tolerate. Every excuse teaches them how far they can go without losing you. Over time, small violations grow into larger betrayals because your silence unintentionally removes consequences. The darker truth is that many people do see the warning signs early. They simply fear loneliness, change, or disappointment more than the danger itself. But ignored truth does not disappear. It grows quietly in the background until the emotional, mental, or even physical cost becomes impossible to escape. Promises can buy time. Promises can buy time when they are used to delay consequences instead of create real change. Many people believe promises are proof of sincerity, but some promises are carefully designed to calm emotions, restore hope, and keep someone emotionally attached just long enough for the cycle to continue. This is what makes false promises so disturbing. In the moment, they sound believable. The person suddenly becomes emotional, vulnerable, convincing, and deeply aware of everything they supposedly did wrong. They promise to change, communicate better, stop hurting you, or become the person you needed all along. For a brief moment, it feels like things are finally different. But often the promise itself becomes the strategy. Some people understand that hope is powerful. As long as you believe change is coming, you are more likely to stay patient, lower your guard, and ignore the growing evidence in front of you. The promise buys them more access, more forgiveness, more time, and another chance to avoid losing control over the relationship. What makes this especially creepy is how patterns repeat. The same apology, the same emotional speech, the same future plans, yet the behavior quietly remains unchanged underneath it all. Over time, you stop living in reality and begin living inside potential, constantly waiting for a version of the person that never fully arrives. Manipulative people often know exactly when to make promises, usually right before you leave, detach emotionally, or finally reach your limit. The timing itself becomes revealing. The darker truth is that words can temporarily silence pain without fixing its source. Some people do not make promises because they intend to transform. They make promises because they know hope can keep someone emotionally trapped far longer than honesty ever could. Empathy attracts manipulators. Empathy attracts manipulators because highly compassionate people often see pain before they see danger. They naturally try to understand others, give second chances, and look beneath harmful behavior for hidden wounds. While empathy is a beautiful trait, it can also make someone extremely vulnerable to people who know how to exploit kindness emotionally. Manipulators are drawn to empathetic people because empathy creates patience, it creates forgiveness, it creates emotional flexibility. An empathetic person will often ignore red flags longer because they keep searching for reasons behind the behavior instead of accepting the behavior itself. This is where things become disturbing. Manipulative people quickly learn what touches your emotions. They study your compassion, your fears, your guilt, and your desire to help. Then they slowly build control around those emotional weak points. Some will present themselves as deeply misunderstood, broken, abandoned, or emotionally damaged. They tell painful stories that trigger your protective instincts. Over time, you begin feeling responsible for their healing, their happiness, or their stability, And once emotional responsibility is established, manipulation becomes easier. What makes this especially creepy is that empathetic people often blame themselves while being manipulated. Instead of questioning the harmful behavior, they question whether they are being patient enough, loving enough, or understanding enough. Their compassion becomes the very thing trapping them inside unhealthy situations. Manipulators also know empathetic people fear hurting others. This allows guilt to become a powerful weapon. The moment you create distance or protect yourself, they may suddenly act wounded, abandoned, or emotionally shattered, forcing you back into the cycle through sympathy. The darker truth is that empathy without boundaries becomes dangerous, because while empathy helps you understand people deeply, manipulators understand one terrifying thing. The easier it is to reach your heart, the easier it becomes to control your mind. Crumbs can feel like love. Crumbs can feel like love when someone gives you just enough attention, affection, or reassurance to keep you emotionally attached without ever truly committing to your needs. This is one of the most dangerous emotional traps because the human mind naturally clings to small moments of warmth during periods of emotional starvation. At first, the connection feels hopeful. A kind message after days of silence. A sudden burst of affection after emotional distance. Small acts of care that arrive just when you are about to give up. These moments feel powerful because inconsistency intensifies emotional attachment. Your brain begins chasing the next moment of closeness like relief after deprivation. What makes this especially disturbing is that crumbs often feel bigger to emotionally neglected people. When someone has gone long periods without feeling valued, even minimal effort can feel deeply meaningful. A little attention feels like devotion. Basic decency feels extraordinary. The absence of consistent care lowers emotional standards without the person even realizing it. Some manipulators understand this pattern very well. They give just enough affection to keep hope alive while avoiding the responsibility of genuine emotional commitment. Every small moment of kindness erases weeks of confusion, neglect, or emotional distance. This creates an exhausting cycle where you begin surviving on temporary highs instead of stable love. You become grateful for things that should already exist naturally in a healthy relationship. The emotional imbalance slowly trains you to accept less than you deserve. The darkest truth is that crumbs only feel satisfying when you have been emotionally starving for too long. Healthy love does not make you beg for consistency, question your value, or celebrate the bare minimum, because real care feels stable, safe, and full, while emotional crumbs keep people attached through hunger rather than genuine connection. Some people want access. Some people want access more than connection. At first, they appear caring, attentive, and emotionally invested, but over time you begin realizing they are less interested in understanding you and more interested in benefiting from what you provide. This is what makes certain relationships unsettling. Real connection involves mutual care, respect, and emotional presence. But people who only want access treat relationships like open doors. They want your time, attention, energy, support, resources, or emotional availability without carrying the responsibility that genuine love requires. What makes this especially creepy is how convincing it can feel in the beginning. They learn your weaknesses, your habits, your loneliness, your desires, and your emotional needs. They know exactly how to make you feel seen long enough to secure access to your life. But once access becomes comfortable, effort slowly disappears. Some people only contact you when they need validation, comfort, money, attention, advice, or emotional rescue. When you stop providing those things, the relationship suddenly changes. Their warmth fades, their patience disappears, their interest weakens. This reveals that the attachment was conditional all along. Access-driven people also become frustrated by boundaries because boundaries interrupt convenience. The moment you become less available, they may accuse you of changing, becoming selfish, distant, or difficult. In reality, your limits simply expose the imbalance they benefited from. The darker truth is that some people do not fear losing you emotionally. They fear losing what you gave them access to: your kindness, your loyalty, your emotional energy, your usefulness. And once you realize the relationship depended more on what you provided than who you truly were, the entire connection begins feeling disturbingly empty. Calm people can be dangerous. Calm people can be dangerous because emotional control is not always a sign of kindness, wisdom, or safety. Sometimes the calmest person in the room is simply the one who learned how to hide their intentions better than everyone else. Most people instinctively trust calmness. Loud anger feels threatening, while quiet composure feels safe and intelligent. But some individuals understand this psychological weakness and use it to their advantage. They remain controlled while others become emotional, making themselves appear rational, even when they are causing the chaos behind the scenes. This is what makes certain calm people unsettling. Their stillness is not always peace. Sometimes it is calculation. While emotional people reveal their feelings openly, highly controlled people can hide resentment, manipulation, jealousy, or cruelty behind a calm face for years without detection. What makes this especially disturbing is how easily calmness influences perception. In arguments, the calmer person is often automatically believed, even if they are lying, provoking, or emotionally damaging others privately. Their controlled behavior creates the illusion of innocence. Meanwhile, the emotionally exhausted person reacting to the situation begins looking unstable instead. Some dangerous people intentionally remain calm because they know emotional reactions weaken credibility. They provoke quietly, push boundaries subtly, and study emotional triggers patiently until the other person breaks first. Once that happens, they step back and let the emotional reaction become the focus. This is why emotional manipulation can feel so confusing. The damage often happens invisibly. No screaming, no obvious aggression, just subtle pressure, coldness, calculated silence, or psychological games that slowly wear someone down while maintaining a calm appearance. The darker truth is that emotional control is morally neutral. A calm person may be deeply safe or deeply dangerous because some people mastered calmness not to heal themselves, but to hide themselves more effectively from everyone around them. Pain can entertain them. Pain can entertain certain people more than most realize. Some individuals are secretly drawn to emotional chaos because it gives them stimulation, power, distraction, or a sense of superiority. While healthy people feel uncomfortable watching others suffer, unhealthy people may become emotionally energized by it. This is what makes certain personalities disturbing. They provoke reactions, create tension, spread drama, or reopen wounds, then sit back and observe the emotional damage as if it were entertainment. Sometimes they disguise it as joking, honesty, teasing, or just telling the truth, but underneath it is a quiet enjoyment of emotional control. Some people enjoy watching others become anxious, jealous, insecure, or emotionally unstable because it makes them feel powerful. Your reaction becomes proof that they can affect your emotions whenever they choose. In toxic relationships, this can become addictive. The manipulator creates pain, watches the reaction, then temporarily comforts the person just enough to keep the cycle alive. What makes this especially creepy is how normal it can appear on the surface. They may laugh while humiliating someone. They may share private information for attention. They may intentionally trigger emotional wounds during arguments because they know exactly where it hurts most. Certain people also enjoy pain indirectly through gossip, public embarrassment, online humiliation, or watching relationships collapse around them. The suffering itself becomes emotional stimulation because it distracts them from their own emptiness, boredom, or unresolved issues. The darker truth is that not everyone who hurts you feels guilty afterward. Some people feel entertained, validated, or emotionally satisfied by the reaction they caused. And once someone begins enjoying your emotional pain instead of caring about it, the relationship quietly becomes dangerous in ways that are hard to detect at first. Apologies. Reset cycles. Apologies reset cycles when they are used to restart emotional access without changing the harmful behavior underneath. Many toxic relationships survive for years, not because the pain disappears, but because the apology creates temporary hope strong enough to erase the memory of the damage. At first, the apology feels sincere. The person sounds emotional, regretful, and convincing. They promise growth, understanding, and change. In that moment, your anger softens because human beings naturally want resolution more than conflict. You want to believe the pain meant something. You want to believe they finally understand. This is what makes the cycle so dangerous. The apology becomes emotionally powerful enough to interrupt your boundaries before real accountability ever happens. Instead of healing the relationship, the apology simply resets it. What makes this especially disturbing is how predictable the pattern becomes. Hurt, distance, apology, temporary closeness, repeated behavior. Over time, your mind becomes conditioned to associate small moments of remorse with emotional relief. The relationship survives on recovery periods rather than genuine safety. Some people are deeply aware of this. They know exactly when to apologize to stop you from leaving. Tears appear when consequences become real. Affection increases when your patience runs out. For a short time, they become the version of themselves you always hoped existed consistently. The darkest part is that repeated apologies can slowly lower your standards. You stop expecting change and start becoming emotionally satisfied with remorse alone. The apology itself begins feeling more valuable than actual respect. Healthy relationships use apologies to repair damage and prevent repetition. Toxic relationships use apologies to maintain access while the same wounds continue reopening. And eventually, some people stop changing their behavior because they realize the apology alone is enough to keep the cycle alive. Chaos can feel normal. Chaos can feel normal when you have lived inside it for too long. Human beings adapt to repeated emotional environments, even unhealthy ones. Over time, stress, unpredictability, tension, and emotional instability stop feeling alarming and begin feeling familiar. This is what makes chaos so dangerous. It slowly rewires your sense of normal. Constant arguments, mixed signals, emotional highs and lows, manipulation, or walking on eggshells can become so routine that peace itself starts feeling uncomfortable or suspicious. Many people raised around instability unconsciously associate chaos with love, connection, or emotional intensity. Calm relationships may feel boring to them because their nervous system became addicted to emotional survival. They mistake anxiety for passion, inconsistency for excitement, and emotional exhaustion for deep attachment. What makes this especially disturbing is how the mind begins protecting the chaos instead of escaping it. You defend toxic people. You minimize disrespect. You convince yourself that every relationship is hard or that you are overreacting. Slowly, your standards shift lower without you realizing it. Chaos also changes how you respond to peace. Silence feels strange. Stability feels unfamiliar. Healthy communication feels unnatural because your body became conditioned to expect conflict, tension, or emotional unpredictability at all times. This is why some people repeatedly return to unhealthy relationships even after escaping them. Their nervous system confuses familiarity with safety. Deep down, the chaos feels emotionally recognizable, even when it is destructive. The darker truth is that chaos does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it enters quietly and stays long enough to reshape your identity. And once emotional instability becomes your normal environment, peace no longer feels natural. It feels foreign, uncomfortable, and almost undeserved. Advice can hide envy. Advice can hide envy in ways that are difficult to detect because envy rarely presents itself openly. Most people imagine jealousy as obvious hatred or visible bitterness, but in reality, envy often disguises itself as concern, wisdom, guidance, or protection. This is what makes certain advice dangerous. Some people do not discourage you because they genuinely want to protect you from failure. They discourage you because your potential makes them uncomfortable. Your ambition reminds them of risks they never took, dreams they abandoned, or fears they never overcame themselves. What makes this especially disturbing is how convincing the advice can sound. The person may speak calmly, logically, and confidently. They may tell you to be realistic, slow down, or stop aiming too high. On the surface, it appears thoughtful, but underneath those words can exist an unconscious desire to keep you emotionally small enough to remain familiar and non-threatening. Envy becomes especially powerful when it comes from people close to you. Strangers may doubt you openly, but envious people near you often disguise limitation as care. They subtly plant fear, hesitation, and self-doubt while appearing supportive at the same time. Some people feel emotionally safe when everyone around them stays at the same level. The moment you begin growing, succeeding, or changing beyond what they expected, discomfort quietly appears. Instead of confronting their insecurity, they begin influencing you indirectly through discouragement, disguised as advice. This is why certain conversations leave you feeling strangely drained, uncertain, or guilty about your goals. Your instincts sense what your mind has not fully processed yet. The darker truth is that not everyone giving advice wants to see you evolve. Some people secretly feel relieved when you stay stuck because your failure protects them from confronting their own lack of courage, discipline, or action. Trust can be demanded unfairly. Trust can be demanded unfairly when someone expects complete loyalty, openness, or belief from you while doing very little to actually earn it. Healthy trust develops naturally through consistency, honesty, and respect over time. Manipulative trust, however, is often pressured, rushed, or emotionally forced. This is what makes certain relationships unsettling. Some people become offended the moment you question them, hesitate, or ask for clarity. Instead of understanding your caution, they act as though your need for reassurance is a personal attack. Suddenly, you feel guilty simply for protecting yourself. Manipulative individuals often use emotional pressure to speed up trust before their behavior can be fully examined. They may say things like, "If you loved me, you would trust me," or "Why are you doubting me?" The conversation quietly shifts away from their suspicious behavior and toward your reaction to it. What makes this especially creepy is that forced trust often benefits the person hiding the most. The less accountability they face, the more freedom they have to manipulate situations without consequences. By making you feel guilty for questioning them, they slowly train you to ignore your instincts. Some people also demand trust while consistently breaking it. They lie, disappear, avoid transparency, or repeat harmful behavior, yet still expect unconditional belief from you afterward. Over time, this creates emotional confusion because you begin doubting your own judgment instead of questioning theirs. Healthy people understand that trust takes time. Unsafe people often demand trust immediately because urgency protects deception. The darker truth is that blind trust is extremely dangerous in the hands of manipulative individuals, because once someone convinces you that questioning them is wrong, they gain emotional access without earning emotional safety, and that imbalance quietly becomes the foundation of control. Doubt keeps you small. Doubt keeps you small because uncertainty weakens action long before failure ever does. Many people never reach their potential, not because they lacked talent or opportunity, but because constant self-doubt slowly convinced them they were not ready, not worthy, or not capable enough to move forward. At first, doubt sounds harmless. It appears as overthinking, hesitation, or the need for more time. You tell yourself you are simply being careful or realistic. But over time, doubt becomes psychological paralysis. The mind starts creating endless reasons to stay where it feels safe, even when staying is slowly destroying your confidence. What makes this especially disturbing is that doubt grows stronger the longer you obey it. Every delayed decision reinforces fear. Every missed opportunity quietly teaches your brain that avoidance is safer than risk. Eventually, people stop trusting themselves completely. Some people around you unconsciously benefit from your doubt as well. Confident people are harder to control, harder to manipulate, and harder to intimidate. But someone who constantly questions themselves becomes easier to influence. This is why certain individuals subtly feed insecurity through criticism, comparison, mockery, or emotional discouragement. The smaller you feel, the safer they feel. Doubt also creates invisible prisons. You begin shrinking your goals, lowering your standards, and settling for situations that no longer fulfill you simply because uncertainty convinced you that wanting more was dangerous. The darkest truth is that doubt rarely protects people from pain. More often, it protects them from growth. Years later, many realize the greatest damage was not failure itself, but the life they never experienced because fear convinced them to stay emotionally small. And the longer doubt controls your decisions, the harder it becomes to recognize the person you could have become without it. Love is not always safe. Love is not always safe, no matter how deeply it is felt. Many people grow up believing that love automatically protects, heals, and nurtures. But some of the deepest emotional wounds people carry were created inside relationships where love existed without emotional safety. This is what makes love complicated. A person can genuinely love you and still hurt you repeatedly. Love alone does not guarantee honesty, maturity, empathy, loyalty, or emotional stability. Someone may care deeply about you while still lying, manipulating, controlling, neglecting, or emotionally damaging you because love and healthy behavior are not always the same thing. What makes this especially disturbing is how easily pain can hide behind affection. Some people use loving words while creating fear, confusion, anxiety, or emotional exhaustion at the same time. They may comfort you after hurting you, making the relationship feel emotionally addictive, because the same person causing the pain also becomes the source of relief. Over time, this creates emotional conflict inside the mind. You begin associating love with unpredictability, stress, or emotional survival. The relationship becomes difficult to leave because your emotions remain attached to the moments of warmth, tenderness, and hope between the pain. Unsafe love also makes people abandon themselves slowly. They tolerate disrespect they once promised they would never accept. They ignore intuition. They silence their own needs to preserve the relationship. Fear of losing love becomes stronger than the desire for peace. The darker truth is that many people stay inside unsafe love because emotional attachment clouds reality. They keep believing love will eventually transform the behavior causing the damage. But love without safety slowly breaks trust. identity, emotional stability, and self-worth, while still convincing the heart to stay. Loyalty can be weaponized. Loyalty can be weaponized when people use your commitment, love, or sense of duty against you. What begins as trust and devotion can slowly become a psychological trap where your loyalty is no longer appreciated, but exploited. This is what makes unhealthy loyalty so dangerous. Good people often believe staying through difficult times proves strength, character, and love. Manipulative people recognize this and quietly turn those values into tools of control. The more loyal you are, the more they assume you will tolerate disrespect, betrayal, neglect, or emotional pain without leaving. Over time, loyalty stops being mutual and becomes one-sided endurance. What makes this especially disturbing is how guilt becomes part of the weapon. The moment you begin questioning the relationship, setting boundaries, or protecting yourself, you are suddenly accused of being selfish, disloyal, cold, or ungrateful. Your loyalty is constantly tested while theirs is rarely questioned at all. Some people intentionally create emotional narratives that make leaving feel morally wrong. They remind you of history, sacrifices, memories, struggles, or promises to keep you emotionally attached even when the relationship is damaging you. Eventually, you stop asking whether the situation is healthy and start asking whether enduring pain simply proves your loyalty. This becomes psychologically exhausting because loyalty and self-destruction begin blending together. You remain attached not because you are happy, respected, or emotionally safe, but because you fear becoming the bad person for finally walking away. The darker truth is that loyalty without boundaries can become self-betrayal. Healthy loyalty is built on mutual respect, honesty, and care. Weaponized loyalty is built on guilt, fear, obligation, and emotional manipulation. And sometimes the people demanding endless loyalty from you are the very people offering the least in return. Saving others can erase you. Saving others can erase you when your entire identity becomes built around fixing, rescuing, healing, or carrying people who refuse to save themselves. At first, helping others feels meaningful. You feel needed, important, and emotionally connected. You convince yourself that love means sacrifice, patience, and endless understanding. But over time, something darker can happen. The more energy you spend rescuing others, the less energy remains for your own life. Your needs slowly disappear. Your emotional exhaustion becomes normal. You begin prioritizing everyone's survival while silently neglecting your own mental, emotional, and physical well-being. This is what makes the rescuer dynamic so dangerous. Some people become emotionally dependent on being needed because it gives them purpose and validation. Meanwhile, unhealthy individuals are often drawn toward people willing to overextend themselves endlessly. One person keeps giving, the other keeps taking. Eventually, the relationship survives on imbalance alone. What makes this especially disturbing is that rescuing people can create invisible control. The more you sacrifice for someone, the harder it becomes to walk away because leaving feels like abandoning them. Manipulative people understand this deeply. They may constantly create crises, emotional instability, or helplessness because they know your empathy will keep pulling you back. Over time, you stop asking yourself what you need. Your personality becomes survival support for someone else's chaos. Your dreams, boundaries, peace, and identity slowly fade behind the responsibility of managing another person's emotions or life. The darker truth is that some people never wanted healing. They only wanted someone willing to drown beside them. And if you spend too long trying to save people who refuse accountability, you may eventually look at your own life and realize you disappeared while trying to keep someone else from falling apart. Silence can protect power. Silence can protect power in ways most people never notice. Many assume silence means weakness, fear, or lack of confidence, but in reality, silence is often used strategically to maintain control over people, situations, and emotions. Some individuals understand that information creates vulnerability. The less they reveal, the harder they are to read, challenge, or predict. This is why powerful people sometimes stay emotionally distant, avoid explaining themselves, or let others speak first. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty gives control to the person who remains calm while everyone else searches for answers. What makes this especially disturbing is how silence affects human psychology. People naturally fear the unknown. When someone refuses to react, explain, or emotionally engage, others begin filling the gaps with their own assumptions, anxieties, and overthinking. A silent person can make an entire room uncomfortable without saying a single word. Silence is also used to avoid accountability. Some manipulators stay quiet during conflict because they know the other person will eventually become emotional, over-explain, or apologize first just to end the tension. The silence becomes psychological pressure. Instead of resolving the issue, it shifts emotional control toward the person withholding communication. In relationships, silence can become deeply destabilizing. Sudden emotional distance, ignored messages, or cold withdrawal often leave people obsessing over what they did wrong. The lack of clarity creates emotional confusion, and confusion weakens confidence. The darkest truth is that silence is not always peaceful. Sometimes it is calculated, sometimes it is used to punish, dominate, intimidate, or maintain emotional superiority without openly appearing aggressive. Because the person who controls communication often controls the emotional atmosphere, and in many situations, silence becomes more powerful than words because people reveal the most when they are desperate to break it. Respect often follows distance. Respect often follows distance because many people only recognize value after losing easy access to it. Human beings naturally become accustomed to what is constantly available. The more accessible, forgiving, and emotionally present you are, the easier it becomes for others to take your presence for granted without realizing it. This is what makes distance psychologically powerful. The moment you stop over-explaining, stop chasing, stop always being available, or quietly remove yourself from unhealthy situations, people begin noticing the absence of what they once ignored. Your silence suddenly carries weight. Your energy becomes harder to replace. The same people who overlooked your value may start treating you differently once they realize you are no longer endlessly accessible. What makes this especially disturbing is that some people do not respect kindness until they fear losing it. As long as you constantly tolerate disrespect, emotional inconsistency, or neglect, they assume you will always remain there no matter how poorly they behave. Familiarity removes urgency, but distance creates uncertainty, and uncertainty forces reflection. Distance also exposes emotional dependency. Some people only realize how much they relied on your emotional support, loyalty, patience, or attention after it disappears. Suddenly they become more attentive, more respectful, or more interested than before. This does not mean playing games or withholding affection to manipulate others. It means understanding that unlimited access can unintentionally lower perceived value in unhealthy relationships. People often appreciate what feels scarce more than what feels guaranteed. The darker truth is that certain people never truly respected your presence. They respected your availability. And once you create distance, they are forced to confront a reality they ignored for too long. Your absence feels heavier than your constant presence ever did. Need can mimic love. Need can mimic love so convincingly that many people spend years confusing emotional dependency with genuine connection. Intense attention, constant attachment, possessiveness, and emotional desperation can feel powerful and romantic at first, but sometimes what appears to be love is simply fear of being alone. This is what makes emotional neediness so deceptive. When someone constantly wants your attention, messages you endlessly, depends on you emotionally, or makes you feel deeply important to their stability, it can create the illusion of profound love. You feel wanted, chosen, needed, but being needed is not always the same as being loved. Real love values who you are. Emotional dependency often values what you provide. What makes this especially disturbing is how quickly the relationship changes when your availability changes. The moment you need space, set boundaries, focus on yourself, or stop constantly reassuring them, tension appears. Suddenly, affection becomes guilt, pressure, emotional withdrawal, or manipulation. Their emotional stability begins depending entirely on your constant presence. Some people do not attach to others because they genuinely understand or appreciate them. They attach because the relationship fills emptiness, insecurity, loneliness, or fear inside themselves. In these situations, losing you feels less like heartbreak and more like losing emotional survival. This creates unhealthy dynamics, where one person slowly becomes responsible for regulating the other person's emotions, self-worth, or happiness. Over time, exhaustion replaces intimacy because the relationship is driven more by emotional dependence than emotional balance. The darker truth is that need can feel intoxicating because it creates intensity, but intensity is not always love. Sometimes people cling tightly not because they deeply value you, but because they cannot emotionally function without the comfort, validation, or security your presence temporarily gives them. Guilt can become control. Guilt can become control when someone uses your conscience, empathy, or compassion to manipulate your decisions, emotions, and behavior. Healthy guilt helps people recognize mistakes and grow from them. Manipulative guilt, however, is designed to make you feel responsible for things that were never truly your burden to carry. This is what makes guilt-based control so dangerous. It rarely feels aggressive at first. Instead, it appears emotional, vulnerable, or even loving. Someone may constantly remind you of their sacrifices, sadness, struggles, or disappointments until you begin feeling obligated to stay, help, forgive, or obey even when it hurts you. Over time, guilt becomes a psychological leash. You stop making decisions based on what is healthy for you and start making them based on fear of hurting others. The manipulator does not always need to threaten you directly because your own guilt begins controlling you from the inside. What makes this especially creepy is how subtle it can become: a disappointed tone, silent treatment, emotional withdrawal, statements like, "After everything I've done for you," or "I guess I just care more than you do." These small emotional pressures slowly train you to prioritize their feelings over your own reality. Some people weaponize guilt because it allows them to maintain control without appearing controlling. They present themselves as victims while quietly shaping your behavior through emotional pressure and responsibility. The darker truth is that empathetic people are especially vulnerable to this tactic because they genuinely do not want to hurt others. Manipulators understand this deeply. They know that if they can make you feel selfish for protecting yourself, you will continue sacrificing your peace to avoid feeling like the bad person. And eventually, guilt stops being an emotion and becomes the cage you live inside. Some people love weakness. Some people love weakness because weakness makes others easier to control, influence, and depend on them emotionally. This is one of the darkest realities in human relationships. Not everyone wants to see you become stronger. Some people feel safer when you are insecure, confused, emotionally dependent, or constantly needing their approval. At first, this behavior can look like care. They comfort you when you doubt yourself, step in when you feel lost, and make themselves appear supportive. But over time, a disturbing pattern begins to appear. The moment you become more confident, independent, or emotionally stable, their behavior changes. What makes this especially creepy is that some people unconsciously build their identity around being needed. Your weakness gives them purpose, control, or emotional superiority. As long as you struggle, they remain important in your life. But your healing threatens the role they created for themselves. This is why certain people subtly discourage growth. They mock your ambitions, question your confidence, minimize your achievements, or make you feel guilty for changing. They may not openly admit it, but your strength removes the emotional advantage they once had over you. Weakness also attracts manipulation because vulnerable people are easier to influence. Someone who doubts themselves constantly seeks reassurance, guidance, and validation. Manipulative individuals understand this very well. The less secure you feel internally, the more power they gain externally. The darkest truth is that some relationships survive only because one person remains emotionally small. The moment you begin setting boundaries, trusting yourself, or refusing to tolerate disrespect, the relationship suddenly becomes unstable. Because some people never truly loved your potential. They loved the version of you that needed them the most. And once that dependence disappears, their affection quietly begins disappearing too. Attention can replace affection. Attention can replace affection in ways many people never realize. Human beings crave emotional connection so deeply that sometimes even temporary attention can feel like genuine love. A message at the right moment, constant compliments, late-night conversations, or intense interest can create powerful emotional attachment, even when real care is missing underneath it all. This is what makes attention dangerous. The brain often confuses being noticed with being valued. When someone gives you constant focus, listens closely, remembers details, or makes you feel emotionally important, your mind begins associating their attention with safety and affection. But attention alone does not always mean love, loyalty, or emotional investment. What makes this especially disturbing is how easily some people use attention to create emotional dependency. They flood you with communication, validation, affection, and intensity in the beginning, making you feel deeply desired and emotionally seen. Then, once attachment forms, the consistency slowly disappears. The warmth fades, the effort changes. Suddenly, you find yourself chasing the same attention that once came naturally. This creates an emotional cycle that becomes addictive. The mind keeps searching for the original feeling, hoping the affection will return. Small moments of attention begin feeling incredibly valuable because emotional inconsistency increases attachment instead of reducing it. Attention-driven relationships also create illusion. Some people enjoy being admired, needed, or emotionally desired without actually wanting deep connection. They crave emotional stimulation more than emotional responsibility. The darker truth is that many people do not fall in love with genuine intimacy. They fall in love with how attention temporarily fills loneliness, insecurity, or emotional emptiness. And when affection is replaced by attention alone, relationships slowly become performances where one person seeks validation while the other mistakes emotional stimulation for real love. Familiar pain feels safe. Familiar pain feels safe because the human mind often chooses predictability over uncertainty, even when that predictability is harmful. People like to believe they naturally move toward happiness, but psychologically, many move toward what feels emotionally familiar instead. This is what makes toxic patterns so difficult to escape. A person can recognize that something hurts them and still feel strangely attached to it. The relationship causes anxiety, the environment drains them, or the behavior damages their self-worth. Yet leaving feels terrifying because pain they already know feels safer than an unknown future they cannot control. The brain becomes conditioned by repetition. Over time, chaos, inconsistency, emotional neglect, criticism, or instability stop feeling abnormal. They become emotionally recognizable, and anything recognizable begins feeling psychologically safe even when it is destructive. What makes this especially disturbing is how people unconsciously recreate the same pain in different forms. Someone raised around emotional coldness may feel uncomfortable around healthy affection. Someone used to inconsistency may mistake unpredictability for excitement or passion. The nervous system begins associating emotional struggle with connection itself. This is why some people repeatedly return to relationships, friendships, or situations that hurt them. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because familiar pain requires less psychological adjustment than unfamiliar peace. Healthy environments can even feel suspicious at first. Calmness feels boring. Stability feels unnatural. Kindness feels temporary. The mind keeps waiting for danger because it has been trained to expect it. The darker truth is that healing often feels uncomfortable before it feels peaceful. Not because peace is dangerous, but because the nervous system has spent so long surviving chaos that genuine safety feels emotionally unfamiliar. And for many people, unfamiliar peace initially feels more frightening than familiar pain ever did. Access is not intimacy. Access is not intimacy, even though many people confuse the two. Just because someone speaks to you every day, spends time around you, knows your secrets, or shares physical closeness with you, does not mean they truly care about you on a deep emotional level. This is what makes certain relationships so emotionally confusing. Someone can have complete access to your life while still remaining emotionally disconnected from you. They may know your routines, your vulnerabilities, your fears, and your body, yet still never truly understand, protect, or value your inner world. Many people mistake constant communication for emotional closeness. They assume attention equals love. They believe proximity means connection, but unhealthy people often seek access for reasons that have nothing to do with genuine intimacy. Some want validation, some want comfort, some want control, convenience, or emotional security without real emotional responsibility. What makes this especially disturbing is that access can create the illusion of love. The more available someone becomes, the more emotionally attached you may feel. Meanwhile, the other person may simply enjoy the benefits you provide without forming the same emotional depth toward you. This is why some people can walk away so coldly after years of closeness. To you, the relationship felt deeply personal. To them, it may have only felt emotionally convenient. They enjoyed access to your energy, attention, loyalty, or emotional support. But true intimacy requires vulnerability, accountability, consistency, and genuine care. The darker truth is that access without intimacy slowly empties people emotionally. You keep giving more, hoping the connection will deepen, while the relationship quietly survives on habit, attachment, or dependency instead of genuine emotional safety. And sometimes the person closest to you emotionally is still a complete stranger psychologically. Niceness can hide fear. Niceness can hide fear more often than people realize. Many individuals appear endlessly polite, agreeable, and accommodating, not because they are genuinely kind, but because they are deeply afraid of rejection, conflict, abandonment, or disapproval. At first, this behavior looks harmless. They avoid arguments, say yes to everything, and constantly prioritize other people's comfort over their own needs. Everyone describes them as easygoing, selfless, or pleasant to be around. But underneath that niceness is often a person terrified of upsetting others. What makes this especially disturbing is that fear-based niceness slowly erases authenticity. Instead of expressing real emotions, opinions, or boundaries, the person begins shaping their personality around what keeps others comfortable. They suppress anger, hide disappointment, and tolerate disrespect just to avoid confrontation. Over time, this creates emotional exhaustion. The outside world sees someone kind and patient, while internally the person feels invisible, resentful, and emotionally trapped. Their niceness becomes survival rather than genuine warmth. Some people learn this behavior early in life. They may have grown up in environments where conflict felt unsafe, love felt conditional, or expressing emotions led to punishment. As a result, pleasing others became a psychological defense mechanism. Being nice felt safer than being honest. The darker truth is that manipulative people often recognize this fear immediately. They notice who struggles to say no, who apologizes too much, and who fears disappointing others. Then they slowly take advantage of it. Healthy kindness comes from strength and self-respect. Fear-based niceness comes from anxiety and emotional survival. One creates peace, the other creates quiet self-destruction. Because when someone is terrified of losing people, they often begin losing themselves instead. And eventually, the constant need to keep everyone comfortable becomes emotionally heavier than the conflict they were trying to avoid in the first place. Victims can cause harm. Victims can cause harm, even when their pain is real. Many people assume that someone who has suffered automatically becomes gentle, trustworthy, or emotionally safe, but pain does not always create wisdom. Sometimes it creates fear, bitterness, emotional instability, or destructive coping patterns that quietly hurt other people. This is what makes trauma complicated. A person can be deeply wounded and still become harmful. Someone who was betrayed may become controlling. Someone who was abandoned may manipulate people into staying. Someone who was constantly hurt may begin hurting others while convincing themselves they are only protecting their own heart. What makes this especially disturbing is that harmful behavior often hides behind sympathy. Because their suffering is real, people excuse actions that would normally be considered unacceptable. Emotional outbursts, manipulation, dishonesty, guilt-tripping, or cruelty become justified because others focus entirely on the pain behind the behavior rather than the damage being caused. This creates emotional confusion inside relationships. You feel guilty for protecting yourself because you understand their wounds. You keep tolerating harmful behavior because you know what they survived. Compassion slowly turns into self-abandonment. Pain can also create survival habits that continue long after the danger is gone. Some people become emotionally reactive, suspicious, defensive, or controlling because their nervous system learned to expect betrayal everywhere. Without healing, those survival patterns begin damaging innocent people who never caused the original wound. The darker truth is that being hurt does not automatically make someone safe. Suffering explains behavior, but it does not erase responsibility for it. And sometimes the most emotionally damaging people are not those who were never wounded, but those who were wounded deeply and never learned how to stop bleeding on everyone around them. Staying can cost more. Staying can cost more than leaving, even though fear often convinces people of the opposite. Many remain in unhealthy relationships, environments, friendships, or situations because leaving feels painful, uncertain, or emotionally overwhelming. But what people rarely notice is the silent damage caused by staying too long. This is what makes prolonged emotional suffering so dangerous. The cost does not always appear immediately. It happens slowly. Your confidence weakens, your energy drains, your standards lower, Your personality becomes quieter. Over time, you begin adjusting yourself to survive situations that were never healthy for you in the first place. What makes this especially disturbing is how normal the pain eventually feels. Humans adapt psychologically to repeated discomfort. The disrespect becomes expected. The anxiety becomes routine. The emotional exhaustion becomes part of daily life. Eventually, people stop asking whether they are happy and start focusing only on avoiding conflict, loneliness, or change. Some people stay because they fear losing history, memories, comfort, financial security, or emotional attachment. Others stay because they hope things will eventually improve. Hope becomes powerful enough to keep someone emotionally trapped for years while the situation quietly consumes their self-worth. The longer unhealthy situations continue, the more invisible the damage becomes. Opportunities disappear. Emotional health declines. Trust in oneself weakens. Sometimes people lose years trying to save relationships that were slowly destroying them internally. This is why leaving often feels terrifying but necessary. Short-term pain can prevent lifelong emotional damage. The darker truth is that not every relationship becomes healthier through endurance. Some situations only become more damaging the longer they continue, and sometimes the greatest loss is not losing other people, but losing yourself while trying too hard to keep them in your life. Closure can be bait. Closure can be bait when someone uses your need for answers, peace, or emotional resolution to pull you back into a cycle you were finally escaping. Most people believe closure brings healing, but manipulative individuals often understand something dangerous. Unresolved emotions keep people emotionally attached. This is what makes closure so psychologically powerful. After pain, rejection, betrayal, or confusion, the human mind naturally wants understanding. You want clarity, you want honesty, you want the missing explanation that will finally make everything feel complete. And because of that emotional need, many people become vulnerable to reopening doors that should have stayed closed. Some individuals know this very well. They suddenly return after silence, not because they truly changed, but because they sense you are moving on. They ask to talk one last time. They promise honesty, accountability, or emotional clarity. But instead of peace, the conversation often creates fresh confusion, emotional relapse, or renewed attachment. What makes this especially creepy is that closure conversations can quietly reactivate emotional dependency. Old memories return. Hope returns. Emotional vulnerability returns. The person who once hurt you suddenly feels emotionally close again simply because your nervous system remembers the connection. Manipulative people may intentionally keep things emotionally unfinished because uncertainty keeps them psychologically present in your mind. A clear ending allows healing, confusion delays it. This is why some people alternate between distance and emotional reappearance whenever they feel you detaching. The darker truth is that not every unanswered question needs an answer from the person who caused the pain. Sometimes closure is not something another person gives you. Sometimes it is the moment you stop chasing explanations from people who benefited from keeping you emotionally confused. And once someone learns they can regain access through your desire for closure, the search for peace itself becomes the trap. Comfort can ruin growth. Comfort can ruin growth because the human mind naturally chooses safety over transformation. At first, comfort feels harmless. It feels peaceful, predictable, and emotionally secure. But over time, too much comfort quietly becomes one of the biggest enemies of progress. The dangerous part is that comfort rarely feels destructive while you are inside it. You convince yourself you will change later, take risks later, start healing later, or chase your goals when the right time comes. Meanwhile, months and years slowly disappear inside routines that no longer challenge you. What makes this especially disturbing is that comfort slowly weakens courage. The longer people stay inside familiar environments, familiar relationships, and familiar habits, the more frightening uncertainty becomes. Eventually, even necessary change starts feeling dangerous. Some people remain in unhealthy relationships because emotional familiarity feels safer than loneliness. Others stay in careers they hate because predictable misery feels safer than failure. The human brain often prefers known pain over unknown possibility. Comfort also creates invisible emotional prisons. You stop discovering who you could become because comfort removes the urgency to grow. Ambition fades, curiosity weakens, discipline disappears. Life becomes repetitive enough to feel stable, but empty enough to slowly drain purpose away. The darkest truth is that comfort can disguise itself as happiness. Just because something feels safe does not mean it is helping you evolve. Some people spend years protecting themselves from discomfort, only to realize they also protected themselves from growth, confidence, freedom, and opportunity. Growth almost always requires temporary discomfort. New environments feel awkward, boundaries feel uncomfortable, healing feels painful, change feels uncertain, but comfort convinces people to remain emotionally asleep because staying still feels easier than risking failure. And eventually, many realize the greatest danger was never discomfort itself, but the quiet life they settled for, because comfort taught them to fear becoming more. Fear makes you obedient. Fear makes you obedient more effectively than force ever could. When people are afraid of losing love, approval, security, belonging, or safety, they begin controlling themselves without anyone needing to physically stop them. Fear quietly reshapes behavior from the inside. This is what makes fear so powerful. It does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Fear teaches people to stay silent when they want to speak, tolerate disrespect when they want to leave, and shrink themselves to avoid conflict, rejection, punishment, or abandonment. Over time, obedience starts feeling like survival. What makes this especially disturbing is how fear changes identity slowly. A person who was once confident and expressive can become cautious, anxious, and emotionally restrained after spending enough time in environments where honesty leads to criticism, anger, humiliation, or emotional withdrawal. The nervous system adapts by choosing safety over authenticity. Fear is also widely used in unhealthy relationships and social systems. Some people create emotional instability intentionally because fearful people become easier to control. If someone constantly fears losing your affection, disappointing you, or triggering your anger, they begin prioritizing your emotional comfort over their own well-being. This creates invisible prisons. The obedient person may look calm externally while internally living in constant tension, carefully monitoring every word, action, and emotional reaction to avoid consequences. The frightening part is that fear-based obedience often becomes automatic. After enough conditioning, people no longer need direct threats. They start policing themselves. They apologize excessively, doubt their instincts, silence their needs, and accept treatment they once would have rejected immediately. The darker truth is that fear does not just control actions. It slowly controls identity. And the longer someone lives under fear, the harder it becomes to remember who they were before survival taught them obedience. Approval can become addiction. Approval can become addiction when your sense of worth slowly begins, depending on how other people react to you. At first, wanting validation feels normal. Humans naturally want acceptance, praise, and connection. But over time, the desire for approval can quietly grow into emotional dependency without a person fully realizing it. This is what makes approval addiction so dangerous. The more your confidence depends on external validation, the more control other people gain over your emotions. A compliment lifts you emotionally. Criticism destroys your peace. Rejection feels unbearable. Eventually, your identity becomes shaped by reactions instead of reality. What makes this especially disturbing is how invisible the addiction can appear. Many people seem successful, confident, social, or highly accomplished, while secretly living in constant emotional hunger for validation. Their decisions, personality, appearance, opinions, and even dreams slowly become performances designed to secure acceptance from others. Approval addiction also changes behavior psychologically. People begin avoiding honesty to avoid rejection. They suppress boundaries to stay liked. They over-explain themselves, tolerate disrespect, and become whoever others need them to be in order to maintain emotional approval. This creates exhausting relationships because the person slowly loses connection with their authentic self. Instead of asking, "What do I truly want?" they begin asking, "What will make people accept me?" The fear of disapproval becomes stronger than the desire for peace. Manipulative people often recognize this vulnerability immediately. They reward obedience with affection and punish independence with distance, guilt, or criticism. Over time, approval becomes emotionally addictive because validation temporarily relieves insecurity. The darker truth is that constant approval never truly satisfies insecurity. It only feeds it. Because once your self-worth depends on external acceptance, you become emotionally controlled by the opinions, moods, and attention of people who may never fully value you anyway. Memories can become chains. Memories can become chains when the past keeps controlling your emotions long after the moment itself has ended. Human beings are deeply emotional creatures, and certain experiences leave psychological marks so powerful that they continue shaping thoughts, behavior, and relationships for years. At first, memories feel harmless. You revisit old conversations, old moments, old versions of people you once loved or trusted. But over time, some memories stop becoming reflections and start becoming emotional prisons. You begin holding on to who someone used to be instead of accepting who they became. This is what makes memories dangerous. The mind often edits pain by mixing it with nostalgia. It highlights the good moments while softening the damage, making toxic relationships feel emotionally meaningful even when they were deeply unhealthy. You remember the warmth, the laughter, the connection, and suddenly, the betrayal feels smaller than it truly was. What makes this especially creepy is that memories can keep people emotionally loyal to situations that are already dead. Someone can continue loving an old version of a person who no longer exists. They stay attached to potential, promises, or moments instead of reality. Manipulative people sometimes use memories intentionally. They bring up old moments, shared history, inside jokes, or emotional milestones whenever they feel you pulling away. They know memories weaken emotional distance because the brain naturally connects familiarity with safety. Over time, memories can quietly shape your identity. You compare every new experience to old pain. You hesitate to trust again because the past still feels emotionally alive inside you. The darker truth is that memories are not always proof something belongs in your life. Sometimes they are proof that something affected you deeply, and if you are not careful, you can spend years emotionally chained to people, places, or versions of yourself that no longer exist outside your own mind. Old love can expire. Old love can expire even when memories remain strong. This is one of the most painful truths about human connection. Many people believe that if love was once real, it should last forever. But emotions, people, and relationships change over time, and sometimes love slowly fades long before anyone is ready to admit it. At first, the connection still looks alive on the surface. The conversations continue, the routines remain. The history between two people creates the illusion that nothing has changed. But underneath it all, the emotional energy begins weakening. The excitement disappears. The effort fades. The warmth slowly becomes familiarity without intimacy. What makes this especially disturbing is how quietly love can die. There is not always betrayal, screaming, or dramatic endings. Sometimes two people simply stop seeing each other deeply. They become emotionally distant while pretending everything is normal. People often hold onto old love because memories are powerful. The mind clings to who someone used to be, how they once made you feel, and the emotional safety that once existed. This creates a painful confusion where people stay attached to the past version of a relationship while ignoring its present reality. Some relationships survive only through nostalgia. The history becomes stronger than the connection itself. People remain together because leaving feels terrifying, even though staying feels emotionally empty. The darkest truth is that love without growth slowly decays. If effort, respect, communication, and emotional connection stop evolving, the relationship eventually survives on memories instead of genuine closeness. And sometimes the hardest part is realizing the person you still love no longer exists in the same way they once did. Because old love can expire quietly, slowly, and painfully, while two people continue pretending the emotional distance between them is not growing larger every day. Some smiles hide resentment. Some smiles hide resentment so well that people never notice the hostility behind them until the damage is already done. Not every enemy looks angry, distant, or openly aggressive. Some appear supportive, friendly, and emotionally warm while quietly carrying jealousy, bitterness, or silent hatred underneath the surface. This is what makes hidden resentment unsettling. Human beings are socially trained to hide emotions that might expose insecurity or envy. Instead of expressing resentment openly, some people bury it beneath politeness, compliments, fake encouragement, or forced friendliness. On the outside, they smile, but internally, they struggle watching someone else grow, succeed, heal, or receive attention they secretly wanted for themselves. What makes this especially disturbing is how resentment leaks out indirectly. It appears through subtle criticism disguised as jokes, passive support, backhanded compliments, emotional distance during your success, or strange satisfaction when you fail. They may celebrate your wins publicly while privately hoping your life becomes harder. Some people resent others simply for changing. Your confidence may remind them of their insecurity. Your discipline may expose their lack of effort. Your happiness may force them to confront their own dissatisfaction. Instead of facing those feelings honestly, resentment quietly grows beneath the relationship. This creates emotional confusion because the behavior rarely matches the energy underneath it. You sense tension but cannot fully explain it. Something feels emotionally off, even though the words sound supportive. The darker truth is that resentment often grows strongest among people who know you closely. Familiarity creates comparison, and comparison feeds envy. Sometimes the people smiling directly in front of you are secretly competing with you emotionally, waiting for the moment your confidence weakens enough for them to finally feel comfortable again. Blame avoids accountability. Blame avoids accountability because it shifts attention away from responsibility and places emotional pressure onto someone else instead. Many people struggle to admit fault, not because they are unaware of their actions, but because accountability threatens their ego, self-image, or sense of control. At first, blame can sound convincing. The person explains why they acted the way they did, points to your reaction, your mistakes, your tone, or the situation itself. Slowly, the focus moves away from what they actually did wrong and toward why you somehow became responsible for it. This is what makes blame so psychologically dangerous. Instead of resolving problems, it creates confusion. You begin defending yourself rather than examining the real issue. Over time, repeated blame can make people question their own memory, emotions, and judgment. What makes this especially disturbing is that blame often protects harmful behavior from ever changing. If someone can always find another person, circumstance, or excuse to hold responsible, they never have to face themselves honestly. Accountability requires discomfort, reflection, and emotional maturity. Blame avoids all three. Some people become experts at this pattern. They apologize while still blaming you. They say things like, "I only reacted because of what you did," or "You made me act this way." The language sounds like responsibility on the surface, but underneath it still transfers guilt onto someone else. In relationships, constant blame slowly destroys emotional safety. One person carries all the guilt while the other avoids growth completely. The relationship becomes emotionally exhausting because every conflict turns into a defense trial instead of a solution. The darkest truth is that people who constantly avoid accountability rarely change, because real change begins the moment someone stops protecting their ego long enough to confront the damage they caused without needing another person to carry part of the blame for it. Distance reveals value. Distance reveals value in ways closeness often hides. When people are constantly present in your life, it becomes easy to take them for granted. Their attention feels normal. Their effort feels expected. Their presence becomes part of your routine instead of something truly appreciated. But the moment distance appears, reality becomes clearer. Silence changes conversations. Absence changes emotions. Suddenly, people begin realizing who genuinely mattered and who was simply occupying space. What makes this especially disturbing is that many people only recognize value after access disappears. While someone is always available, their importance can become invisible. The human mind often overlooks what feels permanent, but once the connection weakens, people begin noticing the emotional support, patience, loyalty, and stability they once ignored. Distance also exposes intentions. Some relationships grow stronger through separation because the connection was genuine from the beginning. Others collapse immediately because proximity was the only thing holding them together. Without constant access, the effort disappears. This is why distance can feel emotionally revealing. People who truly care usually find ways to remain consistent even when life changes. But people attached only to convenience often drift away the moment maintaining the relationship requires effort. What makes this psychologically powerful is that absence removes distraction. You stop focusing on words and start noticing patterns. Who reaches out first? Who remembers you? Who only appears when they need something? Distance removes emotional noise and exposes emotional investment. The darkest truth is that some people never realize your value until your energy, attention, and presence are no longer available to them. Only then do they feel the emptiness you quietly filled for so long. Because closeness can create comfort, but distance reveals importance. And sometimes the people who appreciated you the least become the ones most affected once they can no longer reach the version of you that was always there for them. Drama can distract truth. Drama can distract truth because emotional chaos keeps people too overwhelmed to focus on what is actually happening underneath the surface. Many manipulative individuals understand this very well. If they can keep you emotionally reactive, confused, angry, or constantly defending yourself, you become less likely to clearly recognize the real problem. At first, drama feels accidental. Constant arguments, sudden emotional outbursts, unpredictable tension. Every small issue somehow becomes a massive emotional situation. You spend so much time reacting to the chaos that you rarely stop to examine why the chaos keeps happening in the first place. This is what makes drama psychologically dangerous. It overwhelms clarity. The human brain struggles to think rationally during emotional stress. When someone keeps creating confusion, conflict, or emotional intensity, your focus shifts from truth to survival. You become more concerned with calming the situation than understanding it. What makes this especially disturbing is that drama often hides accountability. Instead of discussing their behavior honestly, some people create emotional explosions that shift attention onto your reaction. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about what they did wrong. It becomes about your anger, your tone, or your emotional response. Some people unconsciously depend on chaos because calm conversations expose reality too quickly. Drama delays consequences. It creates distraction, guilt, exhaustion, and emotional confusion strong enough to keep unhealthy patterns alive. Over time, constant drama changes people psychologically. Peace begins feeling unfamiliar. Calmness feels suspicious. Emotional instability becomes normalized because chaos has replaced safety as the emotional atmosphere of the relationship. The darkest truth is that some people create drama intentionally because confusion protects them. A distracted person is easier to manipulate than a calm and observant one. And while everyone stays emotionally focused on the chaos, the real truth quietly remains hidden underneath it all. Shame keeps people loyal. Shame keeps people loyal in ways most never fully understand. Many toxic relationships, unhealthy families, and controlling environments survive not because people are happy, but because shame quietly convinces them they deserve the pain they are experiencing. At first, the shame feels small. You are made to feel too emotional, too difficult, too sensitive, too needy, or somehow responsible for the problems around you. Over time, those repeated messages slowly become internal beliefs. Instead of questioning the mistreatment, you begin questioning yourself. This is what makes shame so psychologically dangerous. A person who feels ashamed often stops trusting their own emotions and judgment. They become easier to manipulate because they already believe they are flawed. Once shame settles deeply enough into someone's identity, they start tolerating things they would normally walk away from. What makes this especially disturbing is that shame creates emotional dependency. The same person causing the pain often becomes the source of validation and relief. You work harder for approval, affection, or acceptance because part of you feels emotionally defective without it. Some manipulative people understand this pattern very well. They criticize you just enough to weaken your confidence, then occasionally give affection to keep you attached. The emotional highs feel more powerful because they temporarily silence the shame they helped create. Shame also keeps people silent. Many stay in harmful situations because they fear embarrassment, rejection, or being blamed if others discover the truth. They become loyal to environments that are slowly destroying them because leaving feels emotionally terrifying. The darkest truth is that shame can imprison people more effectively than control through force. Because once someone believes they are unworthy of better treatment, they stop resisting mistreatment altogether, and eventually, the fear of feeling unwanted becomes stronger than the pain of staying where they are constantly being hurt. Control often sounds caring. Control often sounds caring in the beginning, which is what makes it so difficult to recognize. Many controlling people do not appear aggressive at first. They appear protective, attentive, emotionally invested, and deeply concerned about your well-being. Their control hides behind affection, advice, and the language of love. At first, it feels comforting. They constantly check on you, question your decisions, want to know where you are, and become heavily involved in your choices. They may say things like, "I'm only trying to protect you," or "I just care about you too much." Because the behavior sounds loving, the emotional discomfort it creates is often ignored. What makes this especially disturbing is how slowly control expands. It rarely begins with obvious domination. It starts with small restrictions, subtle guilt, emotional pressure, or constant monitoring disguised as concern. Over time, you begin adjusting your behavior to avoid upsetting them. Some controlling people genuinely believe their behavior is love because control gives them emotional security. Your independence, confidence, or unpredictability creates anxiety for them, so they attempt to manage your actions to reduce their own fear. Others use care strategically because direct control would expose their intentions too quickly. Concern becomes the perfect disguise. They influence your decisions while making you feel guilty for resisting. This creates a dangerous emotional trap where the controlled person begins confusing restriction with love. Jealousy feels like protection. Possessiveness feels like devotion. Emotional pressure feels like proof of importance. The darkest truth is that real care respects freedom. Genuine love does not require constant control over your choices, emotions, friendships, or identity. Because the moment someone consistently prioritizes managing your behavior over respecting your autonomy, the relationship slowly stops feeling safe, and what once sounded protective begins revealing itself as fear, insecurity, or the need for power hidden behind the comforting language of care. Excuses protect patterns. Excuses protect patterns because they allow harmful behavior to continue without forcing real change. Many people believe excuses are harmless explanations, but repeated excuses often become psychological shields that protect destructive habits, toxic behaviors, and emotional immaturity from accountability. At first, excuses sound reasonable. Stress, trauma, bad timing, misunderstanding. Everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes explanations are valid, but when the same harmful behavior keeps repeating, while the explanation changes every time, the excuse stops being honesty and starts becoming protection for the pattern itself. This is what makes excuses so dangerous. They create the illusion of self-awareness without requiring transformation. A person may fully understand the damage they are causing, speak emotionally about it, and even appear regretful, yet still continue repeating the exact same behavior afterward. What makes this especially disturbing is that excuses often manipulate empathy. Caring people naturally want to understand others, so they become patient, forgiving, and willing to give more chances. Over time, they stop paying attention to actions and start becoming emotionally attached to explanations instead. Some people become trapped in cycles for years because they keep believing the next apology, the next promise, or the next excuse will finally lead to change. But patterns reveal truth more clearly than words ever can. Excuses also protect comfort. Real accountability requires discomfort, discipline, honesty, and effort. Excuses remove that pressure by making the behavior seem temporary, accidental, or unavoidable. The darkest truth is that repeated excuses are often unconscious permission slips. The more someone successfully explains away their behavior, the less urgency they feel to actually change it, because people rarely transform what they constantly justify, and eventually, the excuse becomes more consistent than the promise to do better, while the harmful pattern quietly continues repeating underneath it all. Soft words can manipulate. Soft words can manipulate because danger does not always arrive through aggression, shouting, or obvious cruelty. Sometimes manipulation sounds gentle, caring, patient, and emotionally comforting. This is what makes it so difficult to recognize. Many people assume that kindness automatically means good intentions, but some individuals use calm voices, affectionate language, and emotional warmth as tools to lower defenses and gain control. The softer the delivery, the easier it becomes to ignore the damage hiding underneath it. At first, the behavior feels safe. They speak carefully, avoid sounding harsh, and know exactly how to calm your emotions when tension appears. But over time, a disturbing pattern emerges. Their words soothe you just enough to stop you from questioning the deeper problem. What makes this especially creepy is that manipulation often becomes more effective when it sounds loving. A controlling person may disguise guilt as concern. A manipulative person may disguise pressure as advice. They say things like, "I only want what's best for you," while quietly limiting your independence, confidence, or freedom. Soft words can also distort reality slowly. Instead of openly insulting you, they subtly make you doubt yourself. Instead of demanding control directly, they emotionally guide you toward decisions that benefit them. Because the language feels calm, the manipulation becomes harder to detect. Some people become emotionally attached to the comfort of the words while ignoring the emotional consequences of the behavior behind them. This creates confusion because the person does not appear cruel enough to trigger alarm, yet the relationship still feels emotionally draining. The darkest truth is that manipulation becomes most dangerous when it feels emotionally safe. Harsh behavior creates resistance, but gentle manipulation creates attachment. And sometimes the people who speak the softest are the ones quietly shaping your thoughts, emotions, and decisions without you fully realizing how much control they already gained over you. Repetition proves intention. Repetition proves intention because patterns reveal truth more clearly than words ever will. Anyone can make promises, give explanations, or apologize in emotional moments, but repeated behavior exposes what a person genuinely values underneath their performance. At first, people often excuse harmful behavior as mistakes, a hurtful comment, a broken promise, emotional distance, dishonesty, disrespect. Everyone makes mistakes occasionally, so the mind naturally wants to believe the situation is temporary. But when the same behavior keeps happening again and again, it stops being accidental. This is what makes repetition so revealing. Human beings repeat what they are comfortable continuing. The longer a pattern survives, the more intentional it becomes. Someone who consistently ignores your boundaries, disappears during difficult moments, lies repeatedly, or keeps hurting you despite knowing the damage is showing you a behavioral truth. Words cannot erase. What makes this especially disturbing is how easily people become trapped by hope. Every apology creates the belief that things will change, and every small improvement temporarily resets emotional memory. But repetition slowly exposes whether the person truly wants growth or simply wants forgiveness without consequences. Patterns also reveal emotional priorities. People make time repeatedly for what matters to them. They protect what they value consistently. Effort repeated over time reflects genuine intention, far more than emotional speeches ever could. Some manipulators understand this psychologically. They mix harmful behavior with occasional kindness to create confusion. The positive moments become emotionally powerful enough to distract from the repeated damage underneath. The darkest truth is that repetition eventually becomes identity. A person is not defined by what they promise once, but by what they repeatedly choose, despite knowing the consequences. Because isolated actions can confuse you, but patterns rarely lie. And eventually, repeated behavior tells you exactly who someone is, even when their words continue saying something completely different. Inconsistency trains anxiety. Inconsistency trains anxiety because the human mind craves emotional predictability in order to feel safe. When someone constantly changes their behavior, emotions, attention, or level of affection without warning, Your nervous system slowly becomes trapped in a state of uncertainty and emotional alertness. At first, the inconsistency feels confusing but manageable. Some days they are loving, attentive, and emotionally available. Other days they become distant, cold, irritated, or completely withdrawn. Because the good moments still exist, you keep hoping stability will eventually return. This is what makes inconsistency so psychologically dangerous. The unpredictability creates emotional addiction. Your brain begins obsessing over the next moment of affection because it arrives irregularly. Small acts of attention suddenly feel incredibly rewarding after periods of emotional distance. What makes this especially disturbing is that inconsistency slowly conditions people to tolerate instability as normal. You begin overanalyzing messages, monitoring moods, replaying conversations, and adjusting your behavior just to avoid emotional withdrawal. The relationship stops feeling peaceful and starts feeling emotionally unsafe. Some people create inconsistency unintentionally because they are emotionally immature, avoidant, or unstable themselves. Others use it strategically because unpredictability increases emotional dependence. A person who constantly keeps you uncertain about where you stand becomes much harder to emotionally detach from. This pattern affects the nervous system deeply. Your body remains in constant anticipation, waiting for approval, affection, reassurance, or emotional relief. Over time, anxiety becomes tied directly to the relationship itself. The darkest truth is that many people mistake emotional intensity for love when it is actually nervous system instability. Healthy love feels consistent, clear, and emotionally safe. It does not force you to constantly guess your value or fear emotional withdrawal. Because when affection becomes unpredictable, the mind stops feeling secure and starts surviving on emotional survival mode instead. Some people punish honesty. Some people punish honesty because truth threatens the version of reality they want to control. Many claim they value honesty, openness, and communication. But the moment someone speaks truthfully about pain, boundaries, disappointment, or uncomfortable emotions, the reaction suddenly changes. At first, honesty feels safe. You believe that being transparent will strengthen the relationship, solve misunderstandings, or create deeper trust. But with certain people, honesty becomes dangerous because they do not want truth. They want comfort, control, or agreement. What makes this especially disturbing is how quickly honesty can be turned against you. The moment you express hurt, they call you dramatic. The moment you set boundaries, they accuse you of changing. The moment you confront disrespect, they become defensive, distant, or angry. Instead of addressing the issue itself, they punish the person who exposed it. Some people punish honesty through silence, guilt, withdrawal, mockery, or emotional coldness. Others twist your vulnerability into weakness and later use your words against you during conflict. Over time, this creates psychological fear around speaking openly. This is how emotional suppression begins. You start overthinking every conversation. You minimize your feelings, hide your needs, and avoid difficult truths just to preserve peace. The relationship slowly becomes built on emotional performance instead of authenticity. What makes this psychologically dangerous is that repeated punishment trains people to disconnect from themselves. They stop trusting their own emotions because honesty constantly leads to rejection, tension, or conflict. The darkest truth is that unsafe people often prefer silence over truth because silence protects their behavior from accountability. Honest communication requires emotional maturity, self-reflection, and humility, and not everyone is willing to confront themselves honestly, because some people only love honesty when it benefits them. But the moment truth threatens their ego, control, or self-image, they begin punishing the very openness they once claimed to want. Access without respect destroys. Access without respect destroys people slowly because constant emotional, physical, or personal access means nothing when someone does not genuinely value your dignity, boundaries, or emotional well-being. Many relationships survive on closeness alone, while respect quietly disappears underneath the surface. At first, the connection still feels real. The person remains present in your life. They talk to you daily, spend time around you, and maintain emotional or physical intimacy. From the outside, everything appears normal. But deep down, something begins feeling heavy. You start noticing dismissive behavior, careless treatment, broken boundaries, or subtle disrespect becoming more frequent. What makes this especially disturbing is that access can create the illusion of love. Someone may constantly want your attention, your time, your body, or your emotional support, while still treating you in ways that damage your confidence and peace. Their presence remains, but the respect slowly disappears. Over time, the imbalance becomes emotionally destructive. You begin tolerating things you once would have rejected because familiarity weakens your ability to recognize how unhealthy the situation has become. The constant access keeps hope alive even while the emotional damage grows. Some people feel entitled to unlimited access to you simply because they are used to having it. They expect your patience, loyalty, forgiveness, and emotional availability without believing they need to protect your feelings in return. This creates relationships where one person gives emotional safety while the other consumes it carelessly. The darkest truth is that closeness without respect eventually becomes painful instead of comforting, because real connection is not built only on access. It is built on care, restraint, honesty, and emotional responsibility. And once someone becomes comfortable hurting you while still expecting full access to your life, the relationship slowly stops feeling like love and starts feeling like emotional erosion instead. Peace may require loss. Peace may require loss because not everything in your life can come with you into emotional stability. Many people want healing without separation, calm without boundaries, and inner peace without letting go of the people, habits, or environments destroying them. At first, this feels unfair. You try to fix everything while keeping everyone. You tolerate disrespect to avoid loneliness. You stay connected to chaos because losing familiar people feels more painful than losing your peace slowly over time. This is what makes emotional attachment so dangerous. Human beings often cling to what hurts them simply because it feels familiar. Even toxic relationships can become psychologically comforting when the mind grows used to emotional instability. The chaos becomes predictable, and predictability feels safer than change. What makes this especially disturbing is that peace often exposes what no longer belongs in your life. Certain friendships begin feeling draining. Certain conversations start feeling heavy. Some people react negatively the moment you stop participating in unhealthy patterns. The calmer you become internally, the harder it becomes to tolerate environments built on confusion, guilt, or emotional pressure. This is why growth can feel lonely. Sometimes peace requires distance from people you deeply cared about. Sometimes it requires leaving spaces tied to your identity, history, or emotional dependency. And even when the decision is necessary, the loss still hurts. The darkest truth is that many people sacrifice peace because they fear grief more than suffering. They remain trapped inside cycles that exhaust them emotionally because temporary loneliness feels unbearable. But peace rarely enters crowded emotional spaces filled with unresolved pain, manipulation, or constant instability. Something usually has to end for peace to fully arrive. And eventually, many realize that the greatest loss was not the people they walked away from, but the years they lost trying to keep chaos alive at the expense of themselves. Hope can delay. Healing, Hope can delay healing when it keeps people emotionally attached to situations that are already hurting them. While hope is often seen as something beautiful and positive, there is a darker side to it that many people never talk about. Sometimes hope becomes the very thing preventing someone from letting go. At first, hope feels comforting. You convince yourself things will improve, the person will change, the relationship will heal, or the pain will eventually make sense. Every small sign of affection, every apology, and every temporary improvement becomes evidence that waiting a little longer might finally lead to the future you imagined. This is what makes hope so emotionally dangerous. It keeps people invested long after reality has already revealed the truth. Instead of accepting what is happening in the present, the mind becomes attached to potential, possibilities, and imagined versions of the future. What makes this especially disturbing is that hope often grows strongest inside emotional suffering. The more pain someone endures, the more desperately they want the suffering to mean something. Letting go would force them to confront the terrifying possibility that all the waiting, sacrifice, and emotional damage may never produce the outcome they hoped for. Some people unconsciously use hope to keep others attached. Small moments of affection, promises of change, or temporary emotional closeness become enough to restart emotional investment all over again. Over time, healing gets postponed because emotionally detached decisions become harder to make while hope is still alive. The heart keeps negotiating with situations the mind already understands are unhealthy. The darkest truth is that hope is not always healing. Sometimes it is emotional resistance to reality, because real healing often begins the moment someone stops waiting for people, situations, or relationships to become what they repeatedly proved they never intended to be. Fear attracts control. Fear attracts control because frightened people are easier to influence, manipulate, and dominate emotionally. When someone lives in constant fear of rejection, abandonment, failure, loneliness, or conflict, their decisions slowly stop coming from confidence and start coming from survival. At first, fear feels protective. It convinces people they are being careful, realistic, or emotionally safe. But over time, fear weakens boundaries and makes individuals tolerate things they normally would never accept. The desperate need to avoid pain begins overriding self-respect. This is what makes fear so psychologically dangerous. People who fear losing others often become easier to control because they will sacrifice honesty, boundaries, and even dignity just to preserve connection. Fear creates emotional dependence, and dependence gives power to whoever controls the relationship. What makes this especially disturbing is that manipulative people often recognize fear immediately. They notice who apologizes too much, who avoids confrontation, who constantly seeks reassurance, and who struggles to walk away. Then they slowly begin shaping the relationship around that fear. Some use emotional withdrawal to create anxiety. Others use guilt, inconsistency, or subtle threats of abandonment to maintain control. Over time, the fearful person becomes trapped in constant emotional tension, always trying to avoid upsetting the other person. Fear also shrinks identity. People stop speaking honestly, chasing goals, or expressing real emotions because they become consumed with keeping situations stable. Their world grows smaller while the controlling person's influence grows larger. The darkest truth is that fear does not usually protect people from pain. More often, it guides them directly into situations where they lose themselves trying to avoid loss. Because control grows strongest where fear already exists, and the more terrified someone becomes of losing love, approval, or security, the easier it becomes for others to shape their behavior without ever needing to use force openly. Some lessons cost years. Some lessons cost years because certain mistakes do not damage your life immediately. Instead, they slowly drain time, confidence, emotional energy, and opportunities before you fully realize what is happening. This is what makes some life lessons so frightening. By the time the truth becomes clear, a large part of your life may already be gone. At first, the situation feels manageable. You keep giving chances, ignoring red flags, delaying change, or convincing yourself things will improve eventually. Days turn into months, and months quietly become years. Human beings adapt to unhealthy situations more easily than they realize, especially when hope is involved. What makes this especially disturbing is that time loss often happens invisibly. You do not wake up one morning suddenly destroyed. Instead, your standards lower gradually. Your confidence weakens slowly. Your dreams become smaller without you noticing. Little by little, survival replaces growth. Some lessons become expensive because emotions cloud judgment. Love, fear, attachment, loneliness, or comfort can keep people trapped inside situations they should have left long ago. The longer someone stays, the harder it becomes to accept how much time has already been invested. This creates psychological imprisonment. People continue tolerating pain because leaving would force them to confront the years already lost. So they stay longer, hoping the suffering eventually becomes worth it. The darkest truth is that life rarely warns people while time is disappearing. Some realize too late that they spent years seeking validation from the wrong person, waiting for change that never came, or living according to fear instead of purpose. And once time passes, it cannot be recovered. That is why some lessons become haunting, because the pain is not only about what happened, but about realizing how much life quietly disappeared while you were still trying to make the wrong situation feel right. Being chosen is not safety. Being chosen is not safety, even though many people desperately want to believe it is. Human beings naturally crave acceptance, love, and emotional validation, so when someone chooses us romantically, emotionally, or socially, it can feel like protection from loneliness and rejection. But being wanted by someone does not automatically mean you are emotionally safe with them. At first, being chosen feels powerful. Someone gives you attention, affection, and emotional focus. You feel seen, valued, and important. This emotional intensity can create the illusion that the relationship itself is proof of security. But attention and safety are not the same thing. What makes this especially disturbing is that some people choose others for reasons that have nothing to do with healthy love. They choose people they can control, emotionally depend on, manipulate, dominate, or use to fill emptiness inside themselves. A person can desperately want you in their life while still harming your peace, confidence, and emotional stability. Many people stay in unhealthy relationships because they confuse being desired with being protected. They tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, emotional neglect, or manipulation simply because they fear losing the feeling of being chosen. The emotional attachment becomes stronger than their self-protection instincts. This is why emotionally unsafe relationships can become addictive. Even painful attention can feel better than abandonment to someone afraid of being alone. The mind begins accepting emotional instability as proof of passion. The darkest truth is that being chosen means very little without respect, consistency, honesty, and emotional safety attached to it. Some people will hold on to you tightly while slowly destroying your confidence at the same time, because true safety is not measured by how badly someone wants to keep you. It is measured by how peacefully, consistently, and respectfully you are treated once they finally have you. Desire can blind judgment. Desire can blind judgment because intense emotional wanting changes the way people think, perceive, and make decisions. When someone strongly desires love, attention, success, validation, power, or emotional connection, the mind often begins ignoring warning signs that would normally feel obvious. At first, desire feels exciting and harmless. It creates motivation, emotional intensity, and hope. But the stronger the desire becomes, the easier it becomes to rationalize behavior that should raise concern. People start overlooking red flags, excusing disrespect, and believing promises simply because they want the outcome badly enough. This is what makes desire psychologically dangerous. The mind does not see reality clearly when it becomes emotionally attached to a specific result. Instead of evaluating situations objectively, people begin filtering information through emotion, fantasy, and longing. What makes this especially disturbing is how quickly desire can overpower intuition. Deep down, someone may already sense dishonesty, manipulation, or incompatibility, yet they continue moving forward because desire creates emotional blindness. The fear of losing what they want becomes stronger than the need to protect themselves. Some manipulators understand this very well. They identify emotional hunger in others and position themselves as the solution. They mirror dreams, create fantasies, and offer just enough attention or possibility to keep the other person emotionally invested. Desire also distorts self-worth. People begin chasing approval from individuals who clearly do not value them equally. They tolerate treatment they would normally reject because emotional attachment weakens boundaries and judgment. The darkest truth is that human beings often become most vulnerable when they desperately want something to be true. Because desire can make illusion feel convincing, danger feel exciting, and temporary attention feel meaningful. And once emotion fully takes control, people stop seeing situations for what they are and start seeing only what they desperately hope they could become instead. Pity can trap you. Pity can trap you because feeling sorry for someone often clouds your ability to see how unhealthy a situation truly is. Many people stay in toxic relationships, draining friendships, or emotionally damaging situations, not because they are happy, but because guilt and pity make leaving feel cruel. At first, compassion feels noble. You see someone struggling, hurting, lonely, or emotionally broken, and your instinct is to help them. You excuse certain behaviors because you understand their pain, trauma, or difficult past. You convince yourself they just need patience, support, or more time to heal. What makes this especially dangerous is that pity slowly weakens boundaries. The more sympathy you feel, the more you tolerate things that damage your own emotional well-being. Disrespect becomes understandable. Manipulation becomes forgivable. Emotional exhaustion becomes something you silently carry because you fear abandoning someone who is suffering. Some people unconsciously rely on pity to maintain control over others. They constantly position themselves as victims, making you feel responsible for their emotions, stability, or happiness. Every time you try to leave, guilt appears. You begin feeling like protecting yourself makes you selfish. This creates a psychological trap where your empathy starts working against you. Instead of asking whether the relationship is healthy, you become focused on whether leaving would hurt the other person. The darkest truth is that pity can keep people emotionally imprisoned for years. They stay loyal out of guilt while slowly losing peace, confidence, and emotional energy. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, care, and responsibility, not emotional obligation fueled by guilt. Because once pity becomes the main reason you remain connected to someone, the relationship often stops being about love and starts becoming about emotional survival. And over time, carrying another person out of guilt can slowly drown the person trying to save them. Love can become labor. Love can become labor when one person slowly carries the emotional weight of the entire relationship while the other simply receives the benefits. What once felt natural, mutual, and emotionally safe gradually turns into constant effort, emotional management, and exhaustion. At first, the sacrifices feel normal. You communicate more, forgive more, compromise more, and put extra energy into keeping the relationship peaceful. Because you care deeply, the effort feels worth it. But over time, something begins changing. The relationship starts depending entirely on your emotional work to survive. What makes this especially disturbing is how slowly the imbalance develops. You become the one fixing arguments, calming tension, understanding moods, initiating difficult conversations, and protecting the emotional connection from falling apart. Meanwhile, the other person becomes increasingly passive, distant, or emotionally unavailable. Love stops feeling like connection and starts feeling like responsibility. Some people unconsciously rely on others to carry emotional labor for them. They expect patience without giving reassurance. They expect understanding without communication. They expect loyalty while contributing minimal emotional effort themselves. The relationship survives because one person refuses to let it collapse. Over time, this creates emotional burnout. You begin feeling more like a caretaker than an equal partner. Every interaction feels emotionally heavy because your nervous system never gets to rest. Instead of feeling emotionally supported, you constantly feel emotionally responsible. What makes this psychologically dangerous is that people often mistake suffering for devotion. They believe working harder will eventually make the relationship healthy again. But love cannot survive long-term when only one person is maintaining it. The darkest truth is that relationships become emotionally draining when care stops being mutual. Because real love brings peace, support, and emotional safety. But when love becomes endless labor, the relationship slowly transforms from a source of comfort into a source of emotional exhaustion that quietly consumes your energy over time. Waiting can become self-betrayal. Waiting can become self-betrayal when hope keeps you emotionally attached to situations that are slowly destroying your peace. At first, waiting feels loyal, patient, and loving. You convince yourself that things will improve with more time, more understanding, or more sacrifice. But over time, endless waiting can quietly turn into abandoning your own needs to protect someone else's comfort. This is what makes waiting psychologically dangerous. The longer people stay emotionally invested in potential, the harder it becomes to accept reality. Instead of seeing what is consistently happening, they focus on rare moments of affection, temporary improvements, or promises about the future. Hope begins replacing evidence. What makes this especially disturbing is that waiting often feels noble while it is harming you. You tell yourself you are being supportive, understanding, or committed, but underneath it all, your emotional world slowly begins shrinking. Your needs get postponed, your boundaries weaken. Your self-respect becomes dependent on whether another person finally changes. Some people unconsciously take advantage of this patience. They give just enough attention, progress, or reassurance to keep you emotionally attached without fully committing to growth. The relationship survives on future promises rather than present consistency. Waiting also creates emotional paralysis. You stop pursuing your own life fully because part of you remains psychologically stuck in uncertainty. Your happiness becomes delayed until another person finally becomes ready, honest, healed, or emotionally available. The darkest truth is that time alone does not transform unhealthy patterns. Sometimes waiting simply trains you to tolerate emotional neglect longer than you should. Because loyalty becomes self-betrayal the moment you continue sacrificing your peace, growth, and emotional well-being for a future that may never arrive. And eventually, many people realize they were not waiting for love to improve. They were waiting for reality to become different from what it had already shown them repeatedly. Some people study your limits. Some people study your limits more carefully than they study your feelings. This is one of the creepiest realities about manipulation and control. Not everyone enters your life with the intention of respecting your boundaries. Some quietly observe how much disrespect, pressure, guilt, or emotional pain you are willing to tolerate before finally reacting. At first, the behavior feels small enough to ignore. A rude comment disguised as a joke, a broken promise, a moment of dishonesty, a subtle act of disrespect, followed by excuses or charm. These moments seem minor individually, but together they serve a purpose. The person is unconsciously or deliberately testing what they can get away with. This is what makes the pattern so dangerous. Every time harmful behavior receives no consequences, the limit expands. The person slowly learns how far they can push without losing access to you. Over time, disrespect becomes normalized because tolerance teaches people what behavior is acceptable. What makes this especially disturbing is that manipulators rarely begin with extreme behavior. They escalate gradually. If they crossed major boundaries immediately, most people would leave. Instead, they increase pressure slowly enough for emotional attachment to keep up with the discomfort. Some people study your reactions very closely. They notice how quickly you forgive, how easily guilt affects you, how uncomfortable you are with conflict, and how afraid you are of losing people. Then they adjust their behavior around those weaknesses. This creates emotionally exhausting relationships, where one person constantly feels pushed beyond their comfort zone, while the other keeps searching for the next limit. The darkest truth is that healthy people do not constantly test your boundaries. They respect them naturally. But manipulative individuals often see boundaries as challenges rather than protections. And the more they realize you fear confrontation, the more confidently they continue crossing lines they know should never have been crossed at all. Forgiveness can enable damage. Forgiveness can enable damage when it is given repeatedly without accountability, change, or consequences. Many people view forgiveness as something purely noble and healing, but in unhealthy situations, endless forgiveness can quietly teach others that they are allowed to continue hurting you without truly losing access to your life. At first, forgiveness feels compassionate. You want to move forward, avoid bitterness, and believe in the possibility of change. You tell yourself everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes that is true. But when the same disrespect, manipulation, betrayal, or emotional harm keeps repeating, forgiveness can slowly stop being healing and start becoming permission. What makes this especially disturbing is that some people become comfortable hurting those who forgive too easily. The moment someone realizes there will always be another chance, the urgency to change weakens. Apologies become routine. Promises become temporary emotional repairs instead of genuine transformation. Some individuals even rely on forgiveness as part of the cycle. They hurt you, apologize, receive understanding, then repeat the behavior once emotional safety returns. Over time, the relationship becomes built around recovery periods instead of real trust. This is why repeated damage can become psychologically confusing. You begin believing your role is to endlessly understand, tolerate, and absorb pain in the name of love, loyalty, or compassion. Meanwhile, your boundaries slowly disappear. The darkest truth is that forgiveness without limits can attract exploitation. Healthy people respect forgiveness and become more careful with your trust afterward. Manipulative people often see forgiveness as proof they can continue crossing boundaries without permanent consequences. Real forgiveness does not require accepting endless harm. It does not mean abandoning self-respect or staying available to people who repeatedly damage your emotional well-being. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing is not hatred, anger, or conflict, but continuously forgiving behavior that keeps destroying you while hoping this time will finally be different. Broken trust changes everything. Broken trust changes everything because trust is the invisible foundation holding every relationship together. Once that foundation cracks, even small interactions begin feeling different. Conversations feel heavier. Reassurance feels weaker. Safety disappears in ways that words alone cannot repair. At first, the damage may seem survivable. The person apologizes, explains themselves, or promises it will never happen again. Part of you wants to move forward because the connection still matters emotionally. But something inside quietly changes after trust is broken. The mind begins remembering pain even during peaceful moments. What makes this especially disturbing is that trust rarely breaks only once. Even after forgiveness, the nervous system stays alert. You start noticing inconsistencies more quickly. Silence feels suspicious. Delayed responses create anxiety. Simple situations suddenly trigger overthinking because your sense of emotional safety no longer feels stable. Broken trust also changes perception. Before betrayal, you naturally assume honesty, care, and loyalty. After betrayal, doubt enters everything. You begin questioning intentions, words, and promises that once felt secure. The relationship may continue outwardly, but internally, it no longer feels the same. Some people underestimate how deeply trust affects emotional connection. They believe saying sorry should instantly repair the damage. But trust is not rebuilt through words alone. It rebuilds slowly through consistency, transparency, and time. The darkest truth is that some betrayals permanently alter how a person experiences love and connection. Even when relationships survive, innocence often does not. Part of the emotional freedom that once existed quietly disappears. And once someone proves they are capable of hurting you while knowing exactly what it would do to you, your mind can never fully return to the version of safety that existed before. Because broken trust does not only damage relationships, sometimes it changes the entire way a person learns to protect their heart afterward. Some people need your silence. Some people need your silence because your voice threatens the version of reality they created to protect themselves. As long as you stay quiet, tolerate mistreatment, suppress your emotions, or avoid exposing the truth, they remain comfortable. Your silence protects their image, their control, and the unhealthy balance that benefits them. At first, this pressure can feel subtle. You are made to feel dramatic for speaking honestly, sensitive for expressing pain, difficult for asking questions. Slowly, you begin learning that silence creates less conflict than truth. So you start swallowing emotions just to keep peace alive. This is what makes silence psychologically dangerous. The more a person suppresses themselves, the more disconnected they become from their own instincts, emotions, and boundaries. Over time, they stop trusting what they feel because they were repeatedly conditioned to believe their voice causes problems. What makes this especially disturbing is that some people intentionally create this dynamic. They interrupt you, dismiss your concerns, mock your reactions, or punish honesty with anger, withdrawal, or guilt. Eventually, speaking up feels emotionally unsafe. Silence becomes survival. Some manipulators depend on this silence completely. If you openly described the relationship, exposed the behavior, or stopped protecting them emotionally, their control would weaken immediately. This is why certain people become defensive the moment you begin expressing clarity or confidence. Silence also isolates people. Pain hidden too long begins turning inward. The person starts carrying emotional burdens alone, while the unhealthy behavior continues uninterrupted. The darkest truth is that some relationships only survive because one person remains quiet. The moment the truth is spoken consistently, the illusion begins collapsing. Because healthy people may not always agree with your feelings, but they do not require your silence to feel powerful. Manipulative people often do. And the longer your voice stays buried, the easier it becomes for others to control the story of your reality. Emotional hunger lowers standards. Emotional hunger lowers standards because people who feel deeply deprived of love, attention, validation, or connection often begin accepting things they would normally recognize as unhealthy. The longer someone goes without emotional nourishment, the more powerful even small amounts of affection begin to feel. At first, the hunger is invisible. It hides behind loneliness, abandonment, insecurity, or the quiet need to feel chosen by someone. Over time, however, that emotional emptiness starts influencing decisions in dangerous ways. People begin tolerating disrespect, inconsistency, manipulation, or emotional neglect simply because they are afraid of returning to the feeling of being emotionally alone. This is what makes emotional hunger so psychologically dangerous. It changes perception. Basic kindness starts feeling extraordinary. Minimal effort feels deeply meaningful. Small moments of attention create strong emotional attachment because the mind becomes desperate for relief from emotional deprivation. What makes this especially disturbing is that emotionally hungry people often ignore their own intuition. Deep down, they may recognize unhealthy behavior, but the fear of losing connection becomes stronger than the desire to protect themselves. The hunger clouds judgment and weakens boundaries. Some manipulative people recognize emotional hunger almost immediately. They identify who craves reassurance, validation, affection, or belonging, then provide just enough emotional attention to create attachment. Once dependence forms, the treatment often becomes inconsistent, confusing, or controlling. Over time, emotionally hungry individuals may begin shrinking their standards just to keep receiving occasional emotional comfort. They settle for temporary affection instead of genuine emotional safety. The darkest truth is that starving people rarely become selective about what feeds them, and emotionally, the same principle often applies. Because when someone feels unseen for too long, they may start accepting relationships that satisfy loneliness temporarily while quietly damaging their self-worth more and more over time. Familiar faces can be unsafe. Familiar faces can be unsafe because closeness and history do not automatically guarantee good intentions. Many people assume danger only comes from strangers, but some of the deepest emotional damage comes from people who know you personally, understand your vulnerabilities, and have had access to your trust for years. At first, familiarity creates comfort. Shared memories, routines, and emotional history make people feel secure around those they have known for a long time. The brain naturally relaxes around what feels familiar, which is why harmful behavior can sometimes go unnoticed for years. What makes this especially disturbing is that emotional danger rarely looks threatening in the beginning. Unsafe people can appear loving, supportive, loyal, or caring while quietly damaging your confidence, boundaries, and emotional stability underneath the surface. Some familiar faces know exactly how to manipulate you because they understand your fears, insecurities, and emotional patterns. They know what words hurt you, what guilt controls you, and what weaknesses make you stay. This creates a terrifying kind of danger because the person harming you already understands how your mind works. People also tolerate more harm from familiar individuals because emotional history creates attachment. They remember old memories, moments of kindness, and earlier versions of the relationship, even when the present reality has become unhealthy. The darkest truth is that familiarity can make people ignore warning signs they would immediately notice in strangers. Disrespect becomes normalized. Manipulation becomes routine. Emotional exhaustion becomes part of everyday life. Not everyone close to you is emotionally safe simply because they have been around for a long time. Time alone does not create trustworthiness. Some people remain in your life because access became comfortable, not because their intentions are healthy. Because sometimes the people capable of hurting you the most are not strangers at all, but the familiar faces you stopped questioning long ago. Kindness without boundaries bleeds. Kindness without boundaries bleeds because giving endlessly without protection slowly drains a person emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically. Many people are taught that being good means always being available, forgiving, patient, and self-sacrificing. But kindness without limits often attracts people who take far more than they give back. At first, it feels meaningful to help others. You support people during hard times, listen to their problems, overlook disrespect, and constantly place their comfort above your own. Because you care deeply, saying yes feels easier than disappointing someone. What makes this especially disturbing is how slowly self-destruction begins. You do not notice the emotional exhaustion immediately. It happens gradually. Your needs become secondary. Your energy weakens. Your peace disappears little by little while you continue pouring yourself into people who may never do the same for you. Some individuals unconsciously seek out people with weak boundaries because they know those people are easier to access, guilt, and emotionally depend on. The kinder you are without limits, the more some people feel entitled to your time, patience, forgiveness, and emotional labor. Over time, resentment quietly builds underneath the kindness. You begin feeling drained after interactions that once felt fulfilling. The relationship becomes emotionally one-sided because your generosity created an imbalance where others learn to receive without restraint. What makes this psychologically dangerous is that many kind people confuse boundaries with selfishness. They fear saying no because they worry about losing connection, disappointing others, or appearing cold. The darkest truth is that kindness without boundaries does not create healthy relationships. It creates emotional exhaustion disguised as love and loyalty. Because real kindness includes self-respect, and the moment you continue giving while your own emotional well-being is collapsing, your kindness stops nourishing people and starts slowly bleeding you dry instead.